Welcome back, bros. What if Naruto was in Scooby-Doo? Let's find out. If you haven't liked and subscribed, just do it already. Let's start now. Thunder crackled and heavy rain downpoured the countryside as a black vehicle drove down the murky road. Beams shined out of the headlights as it continued its trek down the road. Inside were two unusual occupants. The first one was a driver with blonde spiky hair and cerulean blue eyes. He was wearing a green t-shirt and black jeans. His footwear though was unusual, a type of sandal often seen in samurai movies. Around his neck was a green gem of some sorts, but his most unusual features was the 6 whiskers, not marks or tattoos, on his cheeks, 3 on each cheek in fact. The young man was a bit taller than average height, with a well-built frame between that of a professional swimmer and football player. The other occupant was an average-sized orange fox, but one wouldn't be able to notice upon first glance that said fox wasn't normal unless they inspected him rather closely. The fox was a kitsune, a fox spirit often talked about in many Japanese legends as both benevolent and malevolent. His 9 crimson orange tails laid to the side of his seats, with the exception of 2 which were being held up to read the map. In the driver's lap was a flyer of some kind. Around one of the sections something was highlighted in red. Grimwood Finishing School for Girls. That was the name of the institution of which he was hired. It seemed like an odd place to have a girls' school so far out in the countryside, but it was paying job so he couldn't complain. It was nice, after spending the last few of his adventures going into hectic environments, to just sit down and enjoy a quiet and normal life for once. "I'm seriously considering kicking you out the window, Kurama," Naruto remarked after yet another comment about the blonde's ability to draw and jailbait. "What has you in such a foul mood? One would think this easygoing life of yours would have unwinded you some. Well, instead of helping me by giving directions, my navigator is cracking jokes at me. It is well within my abilities to multitask." Naruto let a sigh escape his lips as they finally started driving by some establishments. Names that Naruto had recognized from the map popped up until he came to a stop at a gate. They found themselves coming a stop in front of an old world-style castle, with hints of Victorian and other old world styles mixed in. The infrastructure gave the appearance of a rather worn-down building of disrepair. One can't help but wonder if there are any spirits here. It is best if you are to be on your guard. Naruto gave a silent nod as he grabbed his umbrella and got out of the car. They arrived to the steps, which creaked under the pressure of Naruto's footsteps. He grabbed one of the ringlets which let out a horrible shrieking noise. He stepped back as the door slowly creaked open. It was completely dark, except for some candles. Naruto turned on his flashlight. The air felt not only heavy but stale, not to mention the old moldy smell. Was this really a school for girls? "Is anybody in here?" he called. Then the lights went on, and Naruto turned off his flashlight. The floor was patterned with old-style wood, and the hallways were filled with old armors from centuries ago. Then he heard growling. He looked towards the source of the growling and saw a small green dragon, which it didn't look happy to see him. "Hey Kurama, check it out. A dog-sized dragon. Looks small enough to be put in your pocket." "The pocket monster? Here? Who knew?" Both of them shared a laugh at this. The dragon growled at him and turned red. It took a deep breath and blew fire at Naruto, who jumped out of the way in time. He looked up and saw the dragon slowly approaching him. Suddenly a woman called out, "Matches. Come here." Naruto looked towards the source of the voice and saw a slightly aged woman wearing a pink tattered dress and red cape and shoes with black hair with a headband coming up to the dragon, "Aka matches," with a rather stern look on her face. She walked up to it and wagged a finger at it. "Bad boy," she said, and then looked towards Naruto, and her expression changed to a kinder look. "I hope he didn't scare you?" she asked. "Not really, I was just more or less surprised," Naruto answered honestly. Whatever this school was, it certainly wasn't normal for housing a dragon. "Matches is very feisty of strangers, but he's perfectly alright once you get to know him," she explained. She then walked up to Naruto. "You must be Naruto, our new gym teacher. I'm Miss Grimwood, headmistress of this finishing school. Naruto Uzumaki at your service." He went to shake her hand, but shook the disembodied hand instead. "I thought you might need a hand with your luggage," Miss Grimwood stated. Naruto smirked silently at the unusual pun. "Right," he said as a wolf-like howl echoed throughout the castle. "So where are the girls I will be teaching?" he asked as a purple bat shrieking caught his attention. "Ah, here's one of them now," Miss Grimwood said. The bat flew right up to Naruto's face. "That bat is one of the students." Naruto was slightly confused, not to mention. Just then, the bat flashed for a bit and in its place was a purple-skinned young woman. She had long purple hair with a white streak in it. Her lips were red and had small fangs coming out of them. She was wearing a violet dress. At the top it was partly slightly to show a bit of her fabulous cleavage. Not to mention the dress was parted at the sides that gave glances of her long slender legs. She looked about maybe 16 or 17. The young one in response to Naruto's statement remarked, "Bats wrong with bats." Not only was her voice exotic, she spoke with something of an accent. "I'm Sabella, Dracula's daughter. Fantastic to meet you." "It's lovely meeting you, Sabella. I didn't mean to suggest anything was wrong with bats, I was just surprised at all." Before anything could be said, a piercing howl could be heard reverberated throughout the castle. As it sounded through the castle, Naruto looked around for its source before he finally saw the originator of the noise. In a high-up window sill was another young woman with frizzy carrot orange hair. She did a backflip and landed on all fours in front of Naruto. She was hairy, covered nearly from head to toe in fur. Her canines, the slight perturbing snout and her overall features indicating that she was a canine of sorts, most likely a werewolf. She was wearing a low-cut black top that showed off her arms and her ample bust as well. She was also wearing a pair of jean skirts that reached down to her knees. She was taller than the vampire and definitely a bit wilder, giving off the expression and aura of an athlete. A long bushy-looking tail swished behind her. Before Naruto could even respond, the girl was next to him, sniffing him. "Winnie?" Miss Grimwood exclaimed in a disapproving tone. After all, not all matters if people were used to how canine species greeted others. "I'm sorry, Miss Grimwood, I couldn't help myself." A subdued sigh escaped her lips. "His smell, it's just so intoxicating," Winnie replied as she took in more of Naruto's scent. "I'm sorry about this, Naruto." The headmistress apologized for her student. Winnie was always one of the more wild students after all. "No, it's fine, it's a canine thing, I understand. You must be the new coach. I'm Winnie the werewolf." She introduced herself with a toothy grin. "I take it Winnie got into the sugar bowl again?" A deep husky voice asked from behind Naruto. He turned around and the last thing he expected to come across were these developments. This young woman by far was the tallest one yet. She was 7, maybe even nearing 8 feet in height. Her brow was slightly furrowed and her bangs hung over her brows and framed the sides of her face, hiding the scars which showed how her face was stitched on. She was wearing a dark green dress that clung to her body with a figure that in most human cases would be impossible for her height. Be that tall yet with that sort of thickness did not happen often or naturally. Her hair, which was done in the square, was black and had a white lightning streak to it. "Hi, I'm Elsa Frankenteen," she said, extending her hand to greet the blonde. Naruto Uzumaki was all he could said, shaking it as he took a moment to compose himself. Any hopes of things being normal was quickly going down the drain. "Is the new coach here yet?" asked a disembodied voice whose tone neared a falsetto. Naruto nearly jumped with a head poked out from the floor. Soon enough the rest of the body came with her. The girl was a light blue, an almost see-through sort of blue, but yet not see-through. She was transparent and wore something reminiscent of a tennis player's outfit. A black shirt with a white light through the middle vertical and white skirt that came to her knees. She was wearing white tennis shoes as well with a very slender appearance. "Hey there sugar, nice to meet you. I'm Fantasma. Sorry if I didn't give you a heads up," she said, laughing hysterically. "So much for things being normal in this world," Kurama remarked. Naruto let out a grumble as one last girl was introduced. Hello, are you our new teacher?" The last of them was the youngest by far and rather shy. A young girl, a mummy, composed of bandages, who was no older than about 13 or 14. Under her bandages one could see glimpses of lightish green-blue skin and thin short black hair. After the introductions, Miss Grimwood spoke up. "You must tired from your journey. I'll have The sun rose as its glow illuminated the sky and spread its warm glow over the countryside. Despite the intensity of the warm rays, the dreariness of the countryside was painted in an ever-glowing of dark and stormy dreariness that blanketed the school. The rooster wakened and began its morning cawing. The noise of the prolonged cawing seemed to arouse matches. Disgruntled, the miniature dragon spat out a hue of flames, lighting the rooster on fire and scaring it away. Bright and early, Miss Grimwood had already woken up, preparing for another day. She went about her morning duty of waking up the girls. "It's morning, Naruto. You should have already risen." Kurama nudged the blonde. Letting out a tired yawn, Naruto stirred and got up, stretching out his arms. "Ooh, I'm never going to get used to these constant time zone changes," he remarked with a yawn. After a quick shower he got dressed and made his way downstairs. "Good morning, Mr. Uzumaki, I trust you slept well." "Yeah, the bed was really comfortable. Though much could be left said about the smell. The girls are looking forward to this morning exercises." "You bet, Miss Grimwood," he replied. Naruto noticed all the Grimwood girls had all assembled in the dance hall, all wearing tutus. "So where are my co-workers?" he asked, looking around the room and noticing no one else was there. "Oh, they're on their way here. They went to pick up supplies for our school." "Oh, alright," Naruto replied as with all pleasantries aside he was left with the girls. "Good morning, girls." He greeted them as they all gave their own form of greetings. "Is there anything you remember from your last agenda? I heard your last gym teacher had to leave because of personal issues in the middle of his instruction." Belle left off right before Revolta have learned ballet. Sabella answered in that wistful accent of hers. Ballet? I don't know much, but maybe I can incorporate what I know with the basics. Now I do know it takes flexibility and leg strength. So I will be teaching you girls how to meditate, do yoga, and a bit of martial arts technique that puts emphasis on the lower body. Naruto raised his leg even to waist and with a rapid jolt, shot his leg out forward and immediately spun and shot out the other leg. Quick, precise, and often brutal if used on another opponent and it connects. The focus and precision can serve you well. The girls tried to imitate and between not using their bodies in such way or a lack of coordination, nearly failed her trip. The only one capable being Winnie as being alike in her body was adapt for high-speed moments and leaping. Of course I don't expect you all to get it right on your first try. He remarked as he clasped his face. This was going to be a bit harder than he initially thought. Looks like Naruto's got the ballet class started. Hand, put on a little music for them, will you, dear? The disembodied hand then went over to a gramophone, turned the crank a little, and put the needle on the record. It then returned to turning the crank, making music start to play. We'll start with something a little simpler. Ball traveling in a circle, spin several times in both directions, only stopping between each spin to rotate in a different direction. The sooner your bodies gets used to rapid movement, the easier it'll for you all to adapt. Oh, V'll be in great shape when we take on those Callaway cadets at sports events. Sabella said. After a bit, the disembodied hand began to turn the crank more slowly, making Naruto and the Grimwood girls dance slowly along with it. Miss Grimwood then approached the hand, looking annoyed a bit. Tempo. Tempo. Miss Grimwood said, wagging a finger at the hand. The hand let go of the crank and let itself get some rest before it went back to turning the crank and faster this time. This made everybody else dance faster. Elsa stepped on Tenise's wrappings at the same time she did a pirouette, making her wrappings come off a bit. Ooh. Tenise said. Ballet really makes me unwind. She then did a pirouette on the opposite direction from last time and rewound her wrappings. Meanwhile, nobody in the room was aware that they were being watched from outside. I have made visual contact by scope. A boy's voice said. Looks like those girls are performing some sort of weird ritual. I'm not surprised. Another boy's voice said. It's Halloween all year long at that old Grimwood place. Several boys in blue military uniforms were monitoring the girls and Naruto through their window with a large scope. Hey, they've got a new student. The boy looking through the scope. A tall blonde thing with what looks like whiskers. Hey, let me see, Miguel. A fat cadet said, grabbing the handles on the scope. Careful, Grunt. The cadet monitoring the girls, Miguel, said. That new scope has a, but before Miguel could finish, the fat cadet, Grunt, made him drop the scope on Grunt's head and the headphones clamp around Miguel's ears. Trigger RRR. Miguel finished, shaking from the shock. The tiny cadet then looked off somewhere else and saw something that made him get the older blonde cadet's attention. Odd, he said, poking the tall blonde cadet, Todd's, attention. It's Colonel Callaway. This made Todd jump and turn in the direction Colonel Callaway was approaching then from. Then shun. He shouted, making all the other cadets, except Miguel who was shaking too much, salute. A man in a blue colonel's uniform with a sticking out chin, big nose, and sticking out mustache then approached, presumably the person was Colonel Callaway. At ease, men. Colonel Callaway said, making the cadet stop saluting. Colonel Callaway then saw Miguel, who was still shaking. I said at ease, cadet. Callaway said to him. Miguel then put his own hands on his ears to try and stop the shaking, to little avail. Grunt then held him still to help him finally stop the shaking. Miguel looked at Grunt gratefully. Thanks, Grunt. He said. I needed that. Colonel Callaway noticed the bent scope and looked through the end that usually picks up what users try to see. I see you have been observing your opponents. He said. Yes, sir. Todd said. Callaway cadets are always prepared. Colonel Callaway then held up a volleyball, not looking too impressed at what his cadets were doing. But you haven't been practicing. At the end of the year the committee will arrive like they do every year and judge your academic and sports performance. It's only because those girls are so disorganized and not as astute to human sport events that we come ahead. After all, their sports events are far too rigorous for human players. He said, dribbling the volleyball on the ground. He then passed it to Grunt, who caught it in his hands. No problem, we always beat those girls. Grunt said. He then volleyed the ball. The ball flew over the net, bounced off some trees, and flew back at them all. Hit the deck. Colonel Callaway shouted, ducking onto the ground. The Callaway cadets also dodged the runaway ball, which flies through the hedge into Grimwood's ear. As you can see, sir. Todd said as he and Grunt helped Colonel Callaway to his feet. With Grunt here and his dynamite arm we got them beat from volleyball to shot put. So I noticed. Colonel Callaway said, dusting himself off. It's all in the wrist, sir. Grunt replied. You could use some work on your control. Colonel Calloway complimented. Keep up the good work. He said, saluting, before walking off. Yes, sir. The cadet said, saluting. Our ball is now in Grimwood territory. A tall black cadet said, pointing to the hedge behind him. Recommend a recon patrol to retrieve it. Good idea, Jamal. Todd said. Front and center, Grunt. He said to Grunt. Lead the way. Arj. Grunt shouted, running towards the hedge full force. He then ran through the hedge with the other cadets behind him. However, as soon as they entered Grimwood's yard, they saw something that made Grunt stop and made all the other cadets run into him. Oh. He said. Matches was holding on to the volleyball and didn't look too happy to see the Calloway cadets. His tail turned red. It's the Grimwood's weird guard dog. Todd said, pointing at Matches. And he looks mucho hot under the collar. Easy, boy. The tall black cadet, Jamal, said, approaching Matches with his hands up. We just want our ball. The answer was, however, ducking a fireball produced by Matches. But I think he wants to keep it. He said, turning to run away. Cadets, advance to the rear. Todd said, as he and the other cadets turned and started running. And step on it. He said as he and the other cadets began running from Matches. Matches blew a breath of fire at them as they ran back through the hedge to Calloway grounds. Panting and running from Matches' flame, I guess we'll be cutting our volleyball practice short. Matches just chuckled to himself and carried their ball off. Back at Grimwood School, a drawbridge on the side of the building went down over the river, Naruto and the girls, clad in jogging suits. Alright girls, nothing like a jog to the heart pumping. Your bodies will definitely start to become leaner as a result. Why did he always find himself in such weird and awkward situations? There's nothing like feeling the wind running through your hair. Sabella said, holding her hair in the breeze. This is good for the heart. Elsa commented. Mine are both beating fast. She commented as each step was accompanied by a small crater. Winnie let loose an energetic howl as she breezed through. How you doing, Tenise? Great, Winnie. Tenise said. I've got built-in leg warmers. Meanwhile, Matches was digging a hole in the ground next to the volleyball, obviously intending to have the volleyball buried. Naruto and the Grimwood girls then ran over him. Hey, if it isn't the little dragon, want to join us? Maybe some exercise will help you hit that most needed growth spurt. This, however, only prompted Matches to rear his head and growl at Naruto before continuing with his digging. Gee, sorry I ask, let's continue girls. He said as he led them through the trees. Running through the trees will test your dexterity to keep running through uneven ground and test your reflexes. I just love running through the trees. Elsa said. Fantasma ran by Elsa and literally ran through a tree. Me too. She giggled. Elsa ran past Naruto. Last one's a rotten apple. Elsa said. At that moment, an avalanche of green apples fell on Naruto, who rolled forward and stopped in a crouch position. Don't see that every day. Unless it's in a cartoon. One of the greatest discoveries Naruto ever made when he began his travels. Naruto grabbed an apple. Might as well snack on one, Naruto said, taking a bite. His left eye twitched as he looked at the apple. Okay, that's unusual. Tastes like it may be going bad. Sabella then approached him. Oh, these are crab apples, coach. She said. Don't you like them? They're fantastic. She then practically shoveled a crab apple halfway into her mouth before she sucked it dry. Oh god. Naruto thought as a part of him started to stand to attention. Think on sexy thoughts. Think on sexy thoughts. Think on sexy thoughts. Allow me to give you a hand, coach, Sabella said, extending an arm. Thanks, he said as he was practically jerked to his feet. Wow, it must be because of her vampire strias, she rubbing my arm. My coach, you see, so fit, she said in that sensuous tone of his. Naruto's face flushed as he pushed away the thoughts. Not only was she a student, he was pretty sure the age of consent in this area was 18. Hey coach. Come on. What are you waiting around for? Winnie said as she ran up and started pulling at Naruto's arm to drag him forward. Naruto could have sworn he saw sparks flicker to life as the two girls' eyes met. Meanwhile, Matches was putting the volleyball in the hole he had dug and was filling it with dirt when a voice got his attention. Matches? It shouted. Matches turned and saw Miss Grimwood approaching him with a disembodied hand, both looking very cross. How many times do I have to tell you, don't dig in the pumpkin patch? She said, wagging her finger at Matches along with a disembodied hand. And you certainly can't carve that into a jack-o'-lantern. She said, pointing to the volleyball Matches buried. Now, get rid of it. She ordered. With that, Matches dug up the ball and carried it off, grumbling. Meanwhile, the short Calloway cadet was filling a red balloon with water. He finished filling it. Here's another water balloon, Grunt. He said, handing it to Grunt. What are these for anyway, Todd? Grunt asked, handing the water balloon to Todd. It's ammunition. Todd replied. Jack, ammunition. Jamal said, writing on a clipboard. He then turned his head somewhere else. How's that new bazooka coming, Miguel? He asked. Miguel was busy assembling a bazooka. Patience guys. He said. This is surplus. Some assembly is required. He then managed to get it out together. There. He said. Jamal and Todd walked over to him. Jack, bazooka. Jamal said, checking off his list. Grunt then approached them. Is this gonna help us get our ball back, Jamal? He asked. Jack, affirmative. Jamal said, finishing off his list. Miguel then approached Todd. Maybe we should test this out first. Miguel suggested. Good idea, Miguel. Todd said. Miguel then turned around with the bazooka on his shoulder. But not until I say fire. He then looked at the water balloon in his hand. This should put out that pup's fire. He said to himself. Unfortunately, Miguel heard him. Fire? He said, thinking he was ordered to fire. No. Todd shouted, trying to get Miguel to stop. Not however, he couldn't finish, as Miguel fired the bazooka and, the air escaping from the back of the bazooka, sent him flying through the air. Yeet! He yelled as he flew through the air. He then landed on Colonel Calloway, splashing the water balloon in his face. Cadet Rover. Colonel Calloway said, his voice muffled. What is the meaning of this? I can explain everything, sir. Todd said, pulling the balloon off of Colonel Calloway's face. Jamal checked off something on his clipboard. Jack, we're in trouble. Jamal said, nervous as to what Colonel Calloway would do to them. Matches, meanwhile, walked up to the hedge separating Grimwood School and Calloway. He then volleyed the ball over the fence. The volleyball was missing in action, sir. Todd explained. So we planned a recovery action. Jamal explained. Right at that moment, the volleyball they lost bounced off of Colonel Calloway's head and landed in the short cadet's hands. I'm the one in need of recovery. Colonel Calloway said, rubbing his head. Now report to the volleyball field at once. He ordered. Yes, sir. The Calloway cadet said. They then ran towards the field. Up, hop, 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 hop. He shouted as the Calloway cadets ran towards the field. However, Jamal immediately stopped and handed Calloway his soaked hat. Your hat, Colonel Calloway. He said. Colonel Calloway took it, smiling softly and satisfied. Thank you, Cadet Williams. He said before Jamal continued on his way to the volleyball field. Colonel Calloway put the hat on his head, only to have it shrink. He looked up at it upon feeling it shrink. It was now a sixth of its original size. For nothing. Colonel Calloway said to himself. Miss Grimwood was placing a silver platter with a lid over it on a table outside. The disembodied hand brought up a silver bell and rung it. Come and get it, dinner is prepared. She called out throughout the hallway. Naruto took a slight detour to brush his teeth to get the taste of that unusual apple out of his mouth. When he came to his seat, he was surprised at the sudden addition of some new heads. He couldn't help but notice that they were definitely older than his students, so he assumed they were his colleagues. The first one had short violet hair and horns sprouting from her head. Her eyes were large and yellow, entrancing to say the least. She was wearing a dog collar with a large bell and wore a revealing two-piece outfit of a black tank top and black skirt, along with knee-length black boots. Not to mention she had wings sprouted from her back. Hello there, handsome, my name is Kurono and I teach sexual education. She finished with a purr and bat of her eyelashes. The second one was tanned and had small angel wings sprouting from her back. Her outfit was just as revealing with an assortment of colors which included red, yellow, and violet. She was wearing a two-piece outfit, a top and what could only be described as a thong. Not to mention an assortment of flowers and a heart was in her hair. I am Alia, I am a half human and a half angel. I hope we can get along. I am the math teacher and the accountant for the academy. If you need to put forward suggestions for new equipment or such, I handle the calculations of the school's budget. The third woman, also a succubus like the first, wore an outfit similar to the second woman, but in all black, and had long flowing red hair. In her lap she clutched a white teddy bear. I am Majetha, I handle history and economics. Welcome to Grimwood, hopefully you last longer than the last guy. You may call me Augie if you wash. The fourth was a woman with extremely long green hair wearing a lavish green and white outfit. With so many assortments and additions, Naruto wasn't sure to make of it. I am Ariana and I am the English teacher and handle their cultural studies teacher. It is nice to meet you. It's nice to meet all of you. I hope we have a good year. He spoke until he turned to the last woman and noticed she hadn't spoken, so he wondered if she was not a teacher. That was when Miss Grimwood spoke up to personally introduce the girl. Naruto, I would like you to meet my niece and soon-to-be successor Gem Hollywood. The young woman wore a long white shirt that reached to her hips over a black skirt. Her eyes were an alluring shade of green. From the white scarf she was wearing he could see bits of red hair poking from beneath. By the spell book she was carrying it was obviously she was a witch. Hopefully we'll all get along since I'm not used to working in small facilities. Oh, trust me, handsome. I think you and I would get along just fine, Kurono said seductively, giving Naruto bedroom eyes. Gee sister, at least wait until after dinner before you plan to sink your teeth in desert, Agi chided, but undressing Naruto all the same. We never had a male work here for long before. Miss Johnson will be quite surprised, Aloki stated. Soon enough an assortment of rotten or spoiled vegetable platters covered the table. Naruto held back a sigh. Well, it was better than when he had to eat garbage as a child, since no one would feed him. Well, everything looks rotten. He finished dryly, unable to come up with a better alternatively. He looked up and noticed he was sat between the two. Thanks. Sabella said. We do our best. Heh. Miss Grimwood and Elsa then walked over to the garden that was situated right outside the kitchen. She picked up the corn, near the only fresh stalk in the garden. But every so often something fresh manages to sneak in. Miss Grimwood says as Elsa pulls out the fresh stalk and throws it away. Thank you, Elsa. She said. Well, kid, not like anything you haven't had before, Kurama said as he hopped onto a vacant seat. Hell, you can eat anything. Not by choice. He nearly squealed as something brushed against his thigh. He turned to look to see Kurono giving him an innocent and curious glance. Keep calm. Keep your self-control. Don't allow yourself to be pulled in. Meanwhile, unbeckoning to anybody, a pair of plants with eyes was observing Naruto and Kyuubi. The plants fed a view of them into a room containing two hideous monsters. The second was a short green pickle-textured creature with a single big eye, a crooked mouth, and 4 green root-like limbs protruding from 4 parts of its body. They monitored what they were watching on the circular screen. So, the Grimwood girls have gotten a new teacher, have they? The witch said. The round screen then showed Naruto. He'll fit perfectly into my plan. The witch said, pointing at him. The green pickle-textured creature then turned to the witch and spoke up. As long as they avoid being detected, my Venus spy traps should be able to give us a constant stream of surveillance over the school. The creature cackled. You have done well, my grim creeper. The witch said to the pickle-textured creature, the grim creeper, soon I will have all of those good little girls in my grasp, and then I will gain a power greater than any of my kind. The grim creeper laughed as he followed the witch, Revolta. The laughter was joined by some odd-looking bats. Naruto was informed on why exactly he was hired, as once a year for a week a council, made of both human and monsters, would come judge the schools which hold a yearly contest. The contest is a mixture of things from sports, academics, and the knowledge one school had of the other side, as they referred. With this, Naruto was finally beginning to get some answers to the questions he had. He thought it was quite odd that a group of monster girls, which including a vampire and werewolf, would lose to a physical game against normal humans. That didn't make any sort of sense no matter what way you looked at it. Apparently there were several team events, and the girls were the very definition of an unorganized team. Winnie was their ace in the hole. She was easily the most athletic, but lacked restraint or finesse. Tenise and Elsa on the other hand were more or less on the less nimble side. And Naruto hadn't formed any ideas on the others yet. Naruto decided a quick dip in the pool would help him relax. Thankfully enough, the school had some nice facilities. After a cool refreshing swim, Naruto showered up and got dressed in a black jogging suit as he met his class down by the track. Morning, girls, he greeted with a friendly smile. Morning, Coach Mr. Uzumaki, they chimed. Now I hope you're all ready for today's first official class. Before we get into anything heavy like weightlifting or runs, I found it prudent to start one of the forms of exercise. Now there are many forms such as speed training, body weight training, aerobic exercise, resistance training, and other types of training. We will be alternating out each day with the exercises until I can figure something that suits you. We'll start out first rotation with strength training, and the exercise I chose is squat. Who can tell me what a squat is? A few girls raised their hands. Ah yes, Elsa. He pointed to her. A squat is an exercise that trains primarily the muscles of the thighs, hips, and buttocks, as well as strengthening the bones, ligaments, and insertion of the tendons throughout the lower body. Squats are considered a vital exercise for increasing the strength and size of the legs and buttocks. Although the squat has long been a basic element of weight training, it has in recent years been the subject of considerable controversy. While Elsa may have appeared to be someone on the dim side because of her appearance, it turns out she was rather astute. She enjoyed exercising and weightlifting and as a result educated herself a lot on the subjects. Ah yes, thank you, Elsa, for that rather detailed explanation. Naruto clasped his hands together. Most people overlook the value of exercise and exercising correctly. You can exercise all you want, but if you do it incorrectly you can severely hurt yourself. Each type of exercise has a means of improving the part of the body. As a matter of speaking, as Elsa said, this exercise will train the muscle in your thighs, hips, and buttocks. but can injure your lumbar spine and knees if done incorrectly, so any volunteers to help me demonstrate? It helps if you're plenty limber. As he finished question, Win was already up to her feet. She practically bounced over to Naruto with a toothy grin. "Will I do, coach? I can practically stretch in every sort of position imaginable," she suggestively remarked with him as she flaunted her chest with her stance. Naruto shook his head, chasing away the thought. Naruto picked up one of the pieces of equipment, a 15-pound bar. This is the back squat he started as the girls watched him attentively. He places the bar on the back of Winnie's body at the base of her neck, or in other terms, lower across the upper back. Now to being this starts in a standing position in which Win is now. Weights are often used, either in the hand or as a bar braced across the trapezius muscle in the upper back. The movement involves bending the knees and hips to lower the torso and accompanying weight, then returning to the upright position. I won't bore you with all the details about the name of muscles, bones, and such. Winnie, if you mind demonstrating. The female lichen gave a nod and bent her knees and hips and lowered her torso and returned to upright position with ease. The front squat is similar, with the exception the barbell is held in front of the body. There are other squats as well, such as the body weight squat done with no weight or barbells, but other than that I don't think we'll be covering the rest of them anytime soon. Since there are 4 barbells, I'll be added on a weight of 25 on each side, at which you girls can rotate out doing sets of 25 until I call time or you become tired. Sabella, why don't you join Winnie? Naruto added as he stepped back. Naruto gauged the girls for about half an hour. Out of all the girls, Elsa seemed physically to be the strongest, as they had no trouble at all with the weight. It took Winnie a bit to get used to, and she got it as well, and sometime after Sabella. But the exception of Tenise, who was having a bit of trouble, the way they lived their lives and background, most obviously not a physically productive lifestyle, had to adjust to smaller weights, with the other girls being placed in the middle. Another half hour had passed until Naruto told them to stop, when most of the girls started to complain about muscle pain. Muscle pain is letting you know you're actually getting a good work. There are 5 simple steps. The first would be some over-the-counter analgesic. He stopped noticing to confused faces on most of the girls. It's a type of cream or medication. He finished using simpler terms. After the entire castle did have a 17th or 18th century feel, so it was kind of understandable if they didn't have too much modern knowledge or appliances. Thank God at the very least the toilet facilities were up to date. Well, the second way would be to soak our aching muscles in warm water. Luckily enough, I brought some stuff with me known as Epsom salt that relaxes the nerves and draws toxins from the body and heals cuts and bruises. Naruto then stopped to wonder something. These girls were so different biologically from him, there was no telling what kind of effect the salt would have on them. We may have to hold on that though. Don't massages also help, coach? Winnie interjected. With those strong and firm looking hands, you seem like you would be good at it. The last word spoken in a faint whisper. Down, girl, Sabella chided in that whisper yet seductive tone of hers. We don't need you scaring off this coach like the last one with your brashness. That's funny, Bats. As I recall, you were the wanted that wanted a little taste of his blood, as I recall, the lichen retorted. Before the vampiress could launch her all comeback, Naruto spoke. Since you both find it so prudent to snip at each other while I'm trying to teach, you can continue doing so. While running laps around the mansion, both looked gobsmacked at this. But coach, they started to protest, but Naruto would have none of it. But nothing, I came here to teach not to break of bickering between 2 teenagers. And don't even think about trying to sneak away. With a snap of his finger, a human-sized puff equivalent to his size materialized. Out of it came a This is a shadow doppelganger made out of chakra. Everything he knows I learn upon dispelling. So if he catches you girls doing something you're not supposed to be doing, I'll know. And if any of you are thinking of running interference, don't bother. I can make up to 1,000 of them with ease at a time. The more mischievous of the girls paled at this. So much for having fun at the expense of their new teacher. Sabella, Winnie, what are you waiting for? My clone will tell you when you girls can stop. Both lichen and vampire shot the other a nasty look before they had to go about their laps. Not wanting to test out their gym teacher and discovering any more surprises. Are they also like that? Naruto asked, turning to the Frankenteen Elsa. Always, she said with a sigh. Those 2 have been doing at it as far as I can remember. I think it's a vampire and werewolf thing. Naruto nodded his head. From movies to literature encompassing his world and the next, vampire and lichens always seemed to be closely connected, from coming to the same source to being mortal enemies, as to where only a creature from one side could kill the most powerful of the other, who had evolved beyond the conventional means of killing creatures from that race. Hey coach, mind if I hit the water? I'm feeling a bit dry. Marion, the sea creature, spoke up. Marion had a condition like most sea creatures where she couldn't stay out of the water too long, especially when physically pushed. Just like Heat, whom he was told didn't do well in cold weather for obvious reason. Sure, go ahead, I'll send a Kajabunchen later with a list of things the rest of us cover while you're taking a soak. Thanks coach, she said, flashing him a grateful smile that looked rather predatory. Naruto exhaled as he tried to keep his wits about him. Of course it didn't help when Kyuubi popped up from behind the bush holding a sign. He doesn't have a thumb. How the hell is he holding up a sign? Naruto thought in amazement. You girls go on ahead and jog back to the mansion. Take a small break and when I get there we can begin the next exercise. With an okay coach, the girls walked back in the mansion, or in Fantasma's case floated. Since she was a phantom she could not build muscle, nor did she have limited stamina. It was going to be a pain in the ass trying to figure out how to teach her. Not to mention he hadn't even began the other girls' cases. Kid. Kid. I heard you, you bastard. What do you want, Kurama? Naruto, answer me this honestly. Are you retarded? The kitsune asked as Naruto frowned. Go to hell, Kurama. The miniature nine-tails snorted. I'm talking about the vampire and werewolf chick. Did you not see my fucking you, or is this another Hinata situation? Because the fact that even I knew before you did shows how unobservant you can be. You're a dick, Kurama, why did you bring that up? You know I'm not that dense anymore. History says otherwise. Unlike you, I'm not an uncaring perverted asshole who all he thinks about is fucking. Hey, I think about killing, sleeping, eating, drinking, socializing, stealing, and planning ways to kill Dave Cooley as well. Damn man, seriously? You're like the fourth who hates that guy and won't tell me why. Naruto shook his head as his apprehensive partner kept on ranting. Okay, enough. Fuck. Just tell me why you're insulting me now. All I'm saying is if you used a neuron ouch of thinking power, you could get the two of them into a threesome. That's all I'm saying. Oh yes, that would be nice. Until I fuck up and their fathers find out. That would be a fan-fucking-tastic way to go, Naruto responded with a sarcastic snort. It would be worth it, you dunce bastard. Not to mention that fish chick was giving you I want to fuck you eye. You know what they saw about raw fish, the kitsune wiggling his eyebrows. Naruto wrinkled his nose in disgust. Man, you're sick, I'm not going to take advantage of my students. Kurama snorted as his tails pat the ground. Like you never did it before. Well, I won't this time. I'm a decent being who can connect with the female populace, Kurama snickered. Without fucking them. Naruto finished crossing his arms. The kitsune moved to a standing position. His fur looked rather dank and dirty. You say that now, but you will, you always do. I bet you for each female on these grounds you scratch the itch with you have to include in as a scene in the new Icha Icha book series. You know the one. Icha Icha harem guy. Damn, did I told you the last one was the end. Ah, but it could always be the son. You know, the second generation. You're on, and at the end of this for each female I don't bang, when I don't you have to go the doctors as an uncircumcised adult male in a different guise and be circumcised. Kurama looked at Naruto with the uttermost horror. You monster. Yeah, well, you're an asshole. The blonde finished as he placed his hands in his pocket and made his way to the mansion. What Kurama overlooked was due to his own perverse nature. He sealed himself to the fate of having it done at the very minimum twice. One female he wasn't attracted to and the other too young for Naruto's taste. Life was good. Naruto entered the mansion after a nice early morning jog. To think out of all the places that would be tame and not result in him nearly being killed on a daily basis would be at a school full of monsters. Who knew? Entering the mess hall, he noticed that the students were seated at one table while the headmistresses and the teachers were seated at another. Joining his colleagues, he greeted them good morning. Taking his seat, he looked around the assortment of fresh-looking food. This food looks delicious. Naruto said as his eyes fell upon the pumpkin pie, his right eye that is as his left one made a beeline for the turkey. After a moment he blinked as his eyes went back to their normal position. Why thank you, Gem softly thanked him. Naruto had a few interactions with the quiet witch who from what he could tell was rather shy and reserved. In a way sort of like a red-headed version of Hinata. Red-headed version of Hinata. Naruto thought as he once more went into one of his more interesting fantasies. You know what they say, heroes love dreadheads. Eat as much as you like, Mr. Uzumaki. Miss Grimwood motioned towards her niece. Gem loves to cook and always makes plenty that lasts into the next day. Naruto looked at the rather assortment of foods being snapped out of his daydream. I see this is quite the spread. Raising her glass, Miss Grimwood tapped a spoon to it. I would like to be the first to officially welcome our newest addition to our little family at Grimwood. Naruto blushed and sheepishly rubbed the back of his head as everyone clapped. Before your arrival, Gem helped our students whip up something. Who would like to go first? She asked as she looked upon the pupils of the school. I like to go if that's alright, Miss Grimwood. Tenise volunteered. Of course, Tenise. Mr. Uzumaki, would you like to try my salad? She asked cutely, holding up a leafy salad with chopped tomatoes, lettuce, croutons, bacon bits, and salmon. Most of the ingredients seemed fresh, except the salad that looked on the spoil side, but hell, if he could survive Konoha's poison garbage as a child for a few years, a little spoiled lettuce wouldn't kill him. God, at least I hope so. I could imagine it now. Naruto could see it now. An open casket funeral where friends and family were all gathered and grieving. His former boss at the teaching academy Kuinshi and Kurama walking up to the coffin. So you say he died by poison lettuce? The dark-skinned man asked as the kitsune nodded. Yeah, part was he didn't even get laid by one of the monster chicks. A mixture of an idiot and chaste hero thing he had going on. Ha! Poor bastard. Apparently his stomach started to rupture and he cried out in pain. Want to sell his stuff and go the strip club? Do you even have to ask? Bastards, the blonde thought, then realized everyone was waiting on his answer. Of course, Tenise. Taking a fork, he scooped up some salad and placed it in his mouth. The bacon bits were crunchy and the salmon was heavenly. Man, if all salads taste like this, I would have them lunch every day. Well, Mr. Uzumaki, if you like Tenise's salad you should tomato soup. It's simply to die for, Sabella said, bringing over a soup. Taking a spoon, she brought it to her mouth and gently blew it. She then held it to Naruto's mouth. The taste is simply fantastic. And guarantee to have you as skinny as a twig in weeks. Oh, I'm sorry, Winnie, we all don't have the metabolism to stuff ourselves with a barrel full of meat. I only need a certain dose of blood to remain healthy, but that's just my metabolism. What was that, Bats? You want to start something? Winnie challenged as a low growl escaped her lips. Girls, that's enough, what have I told you about such behavior? Miss Grimwood chided as both girls' shoulder dropped. Sorry, Miss Grimwood, they apologized to the headmistress before shooting each other a fierce look. With one hand, Naruto took a bite of salad using his fork while using his other hand and taking a sip of soup with his spoon. Oh man, this beats the peanut butter crackers and Twinkies on the drive up here. Now who's next? I hope you have a hefty appetite, coach. With a clang, a nice juicy steak was placed in front of Naruto courtesy of Winnie. After being handed a knife, Naruto cut a piece and found it quite tasty. So what's next? He asked, a bit more excited than he was initially. The Frankenstein special pumpkin pie. Elsa exclaimed proudly as the rather green pie was sat in front of him. Shrugging, Naruto took a chunk out of the fork and simply ate it. It was chewy but eatable nonetheless. Ew. My turn. Fanty declared in a high-pitched tone as she placed a bowl in front of Naruto. Naruto began to sniff, choked up. Coach, you okay? Mr. Uzumaki? Is something wrong? I can't believe this. Miso ramen. Naruto cried out joyfully as he had to stop himself from inhaling the bowl. With spoon in hand, he took a sip. And another one. And another one. And two more. And he kept on going. Oh man, old friend. I thought I'd never see you again. He said, barely able to contain his joy. Auntie giggled at Naruto's antics. I'm glad you like it. She said, oblivious to the glares being sent in her direction. You girls can go back to your meals now. We have something we need to discuss with Mr. Uzumaki. Yes, Miss Grimwood. The girls chimed as they went back to their table on the other side of the room. Now it's time we settle the matter of scheduling, Miss Grimwood stated as Naruto looked at his empty bowl of miso ramen with a pout. Wait, schedule? Yes, we have to make some adjustments due to the fact we'll be down one instructor. I got word last night from Miss Robinson and she won't be joining us. The poor dear has come down with a rather ghastly injury during her vacation last year and won't be able to return this year. Looked like this coaching job was going to be more involved than he initially thought. Okay girls, I've gathered you all here to explain 3 new developments. Naruto started as he passed out a sheet of paper to each girl. They were in one of the school's classrooms, which really needed some work. Monster school or not, rotting floors, cracked windows, and shredded curtains was a bit much. Since the teacher that was supposed to teach you girls how to socialize and blend in with humans has been diagnosed with an illness, she won't be arriving this year to teach you. So after much conversing and thought, I've been chosen to be your new social and human skills teacher, or whatever the devil the class is called. Secondly, during the course of this year we're going to be playing a game of sorts. The rules will be explained along the way. Behavior and performance impacts how well you do in this game. The one with the most points will win the prize of one request from me. You can have any wish, ask me to tell you anything or get you a particular or rare treat within reasonable limits. This is explained in more detail on your papers. And lastly, I'll be mashing together class periods, a time where I will be spending one-on-one time with you girls, where I'll try to better understand how to train you girls or fill you in on certain knowledge you missed out on. Any questions? He asked as Sabella's hand shot up. Will we be traveling any during the course of this year? Well, field trips haven't really crossed my mind. I mean, it hasn't been a week yet, but I suppose taking you girls out to the city once or twice to see how people would act would help. Halloween is a few weeks away and some people like to dress up in costumes early so you all can't fit in. If that scenario doesn't work, I can always use some genjutsu. Most of the girls shared a confused look at this. Yeah, I know a lot about being human from the socializing my father often does for the sake of his company. Does that mean I'll be exempt, or is there something I can do in the meantime? She asked as an expression of boredom was rather prominent on her face as she traced a line on her desk with a finger. If you wouldn't mind, you can be a tutor of sorts to the other girls. Think of it as a means to earn some extra credit. What about the rest of us? We can earn extra credit as well, right? Naruto's eyes trailed to Elsa. Don't worry, Elsa, everyone will get a fair chance. He then clapped his hands together. He went over the desk and picked up a book he had brought to begin his first lesson on teaching the girls. Alright girls, we'll hold the rest of the questions until after class. Now I'll begin teaching you girl your first lesson in Icha. Why? Naruto's head damn near snapped as he turned his head to the book he was holding up. How the hell did that get there? Sure enough, Kurama's ass was responsible. His head popped up in the window and he was holding a sign once again that read, "Got you, Uzumaki." Naruto was not only pissed but confused. Pissed because that bastard now put him in a spot where once he hid the book or changed the subjects, the girl would probably be curious about it and it could lead back to the rest of the faculty. Confused because once again Kurama was holding up a sign without thumbs. "We're on the second floor. What are you standing from?" He mouthed to the laughing kitsune, whose eyes widened and he began to fall. "Treats you right, you bastard." Naruto turns his attention back to the girls with a nervous grin. "Ah shit. How am I supposed to get out of this one?" "You want me to what?" Naruto cried out as the red-haired busty succubus suggested he do something highly inappropriate to help demonstrate something during her sex ed class. "I'm afraid there was a bit of a mix-up," the red-haired succubus replied nonchalantly. "The cadaver is rather old and rotten. I can't teach the girls with it missing the vital parts, you know." Naruto's face scrunched up like he was standing next to a person that'd been bathed in skunk puss. "I'm sorry, what now?" After the little incident with the Icha book, he doubled his efforts of being cautious as to not be pranked by the Kyuubi again. Thankfully enough, Naruto was able to convince the girls the book was about human cooking practices, so they quickly lost interest. "Well, I mean, it's not like we have technology or that we can just go get a corpse." "Whoa." Naruto cried out, interrupting her and waving his hands frantically as he repressed a shiver. "I really don't want to know. God, I really don't. But come on, isn't exposing myself highly inappropriate? I mean, they are teenage girls." "Oh, you silly man. You're thinking of human standards. Us monsters are far more lax when it comes to education. Besides, it'll be in a controlled environment. It would be different if you were trying to elicit sexual favors from them in a position of power in an offensive manner to their monster heritage." "Okay, everything isn't completely off the chart and offensive to their monster heritage. I'm not even going to." Before Naruto could finish, he was hit with a very powerful and alluring charm that caused his mind to go into a haze. When he finally came to, he found himself in a classroom. He looked down to found himself chained in a chair wearing nothing but his boxers. "Damn it. Not again," he cried out in his mind. When in the hell did Unko get here? Though his thoughts were interrupted when the sound of his students' voices was heard from outside. "Did you hear? Naruto-sensei apparently volunteered to be the dummy for class today." "When Well, isn't that marvelous? Daddy did always say demonstrations are better given live than post-mortem, or did he say modern?" "Sabella. Ooh, this is so exciting. My spine is tingling, that is if I had a spine. Ha. Oh hell, it's all the girls. Kurono isn't going to. Alright girls, I want you to remember something. A man's wang comes in different sizes, some are small and thin, while others are large and thick. Though by my estimation your coach definitely isn't nothing to sneeze at, but we'll get to that more once the lecture begins. This school, it's freaking crazy. Kyuubi, if you can hear me. I need help. They got me." "Wait, what?" "The crazy succubus has tied me up and undressed me and is going to expose me to the girls." "Wait a minute, you want me to save you for a crazy and voluptuous succubus who has set you up for a possible orgy of you hot monster tang? Why do I even bother talking to you?" Naruto cut the link and began praying for a miracle. Though no miracle would help him as the girls soon entered the classroom and the lesson began. Naruto couldn't believe what the hell was going on. He wasn't currently being exposed and stroked by a hot succubus in front of a group of teenage monster girls, making this the fourth weirdest thing that ever happened in his life. He could only listen and watch as Kurono began all the ways a woman could arouse a man by using her hand, even going as far as demonstrating a few techniques with her mouth. Suffice to say, the situation wasn't all too terrible. And that's how you suppress your gag reflex so you can fit the whole thing in your mouth. Now onto some nasty STDs you can get. First, there's scabies. A nasty sort of infection that can develop small scars on your lower lips. Naruto looked absolutely horrified. He knew of no such sexual disease when it came to humans. In fact, he was proud to say he had only caught an STD once. Gonorrhea, unfortunately, and it burned like a motherfucker. That taught Naruto to scale down on the jumping in the sack and being more careful. Thankfully enough, the right set of drugs and his healing factor completely cured him. At least he didn't catch a combination of syphilis and crabs like O'Malley did. And then there is munities. Nasty little buggers that thrive in hair. They like to burrow inside the area near your twat and lay eggs in the hair, so you girls that like to naturally grow your bush or have hair, you'll want to be careful. There's a combination of special shampoo and ailments that can kill them in 4 to 6 weeks. Naruto couldn't help but shudder at that. Though considering most of these girls had monster heritage, it figures monsters would need stronger STDs to be infected. Now that he thought about it, when it came to manga, anime, animation, literature or just about anything in human culture, such diseases were never mentioned and all in connection with monsters. Yeah, sure, they had weaknesses and means to kill them, but STDs and such were never brought up. It was always humans being killed by such things. One by one the succubus listed off various nasty little mood killers until Naruto found himself limp. He doubted even one of Kurono's tits smacking him in the face could wake up little Naruto. Now who wants to practice their HJs on Mr. Naruto here while he's volunteering? Naruto's head snapped up so quickly he had to briefly mutter an ow and considered going to the doctor for a possible pulled muscle. Woman, are you out of your? Kurono's hand quickly clammed over Naruto's mouth. The blonde finally knew what it felt like to be an injured zebra cornered by hungry lions. Sexy teenage lionesses that had a hunger for learning. Yes, learning. 2 hours later Naruto was walking through the hallways of the academy, feeling a mixture of shame and relief. Somehow, someway, that blasted woman somehow made him unable to realize to use his ninja abilities to escape. That evil, manipulative, kinky, big-breasted, even his own thoughts were betraying him now. Naruto found himself in Kurono's room, wanting to give the succubus a piece of his mind, but surprising enough she wasn't there. Instead his eyes lay upon an interesting photo of a blue-haired girl wearing a school uniform. The family resemblance was uncanny, even down to the massive mammaries. I see you're admiring my niece, a seductive voice called from the doorway. Kurono, we need to talk about what happened. Yes, talk, champagne. She asked, mysteriously materializing a bottle and 2 glasses out of nowhere. I don't appreciate what you did. You used my body against my will and invaded my personal space. I ought to report you to, well, whoever the hell deals with these matters. Have you no shame at all? With each statement his voice began raising until he noticed Kurono's face fail. Oh heavens, you're right, I'm a horrible woman, dreadfully horrible, how can I live myself? I'll throw myself in prison. You'll never have to deal with me again. She cried out, working the tears and looking pitiful. Naruto wanted to be mad. He knew just what Kurono was trying to do. Or what he thought she might have been doing. Damn it. Why did he have such a soft heart with women? Look, okay, I was mad, but maybe it wasn't that big of a deal, okay? Let's just forget the whole thing happened, he grumbled as Kurono practically shot into his arms. Oh, you're so kind, Naruto, and forgiving too. It won't happen again, I promise, she said, pressing her face into his chest to hide her grin. Yeah, okay, so you said the girl in the picture is your niece? Yep. Lil Kurumu-chan, she's the daughter of my older sister Uchiha and attends Gakuen Academy out east. My first name isn't Kurono, it's actually my family name. My first name is Kamula, I just go by my family name, but enough about that, I suppose I should get on with my apology. By apology, holy crap, is Kamula fondling my crotch? Naruto let a moan escape his lips and mentally cursed. God damn it. Where's my pad and pen? The blonde thought, already knowing he was about to fail the bet and have to start writing Icha again, but at least in the way he was failing was in the most spectacular way possible. Hello there Naruto, do you have a minute? A soft melodic voice called out to him. Huh? He looked up and noticed it was one of his colleagues, Alia, that was her name, and if he was remembering right she was a Nephilim. Oh, hello Alia-san, is there something I can help you with? Actually, there's something I should warn you about. There have been a lot of disappearances as of late. So far the disappearances have been relegated to species like ogres or such, but I thought I should warn you all the same. Thank you for your concern. He contemplated her words for a moment. Is there any clue to who's behind the disappearances? No, at some of the attack sites they did manage to find some reptilian scales. Whatever it is, it's something strange, something new that hasn't been encountered yet. Well, I'll keep my eyes open. Anyway, it's about time for me to begin my class, so maybe we can catch up later. Once again, thank you for the warning. He said, bidding goodbye as he went to get the gym equipment and went down to the field to set it up. Once his students arrived he began instructing them. Now we're going to briefly go over a few warm-up and hurdle exercises and briefly go over the relay as well. Now this first exercise is the high knee lifts. Taking the hips tall position, alternating legs, while driving up the knee up as high as possible while joking. Then you gradually increase pace from walking to jogging. He said while demonstrating. Do 3 reps for about 30 meters, then switch to the other legs. I want you all to do high knee lifts for each legs 5 times. Naruto watched as each of the girls went about doing the exercises and he really wished they didn't have gym uniforms, or if they did it didn't consist of knee-length skirts and casual white tops. Most of the girls were doing fine. Elsa needed a bit of help while those like Winnie were a bit more limber, though Tenise, and was definitely going to need more work thanks to her biological condition. As they finished up the exercise, Naruto went on to instruct them in skips. Remember, keep your foot flexed. He instructed as he flipped through the pages of his book until he came to a particular one. Ow crap. He softly murmured to himself. I'm going to need a volunteer for this next one. He said as Winnie practically teleported next to his side. Damn, this girl is quick. Ready when you are, coach, she responded with a confident toothy grin. Okay, now face me and place your hands on my shoulders, he instructed as he noticed something different about his student. Her hair was less frizzier than normal, and did he smell shampoo? Okay, now this is the takeoff sensation drill. Now I'm going to instruct with each how to do this so you can practice with your teammates. Now after facing your teammate you hold their leg just below the bent knee. He said, picking up her leg and holding her knee as she leaned forward. He was surprised by how soft her leg fur was and had to suppress a shudder. Damn it, Uzumaki, keep yourself together. He thought as he gradually took a backward step, lifting her leg knee as he informed her to lean forward, only for her to fall over against him. Oops, sorry coach. I guess I lost my balance, she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face as her cleavage continued to press into Naruto's chest. Right. We'll work on your balance more than later. So you go join the others. He instructed, letting down her legs. Alright, Heat, you're next. You're absolutely shameless, aren't you? Sabella challenged as Winnie continued to grin. What's wrong, Bats? Jealous. Of you? Hardly, I don't find it necessary to throw myself at our coach shamelessly. You guys know if you keep this up, coach will have you running laps again. Fanty said as the two monsters shot her glare. Elsewhere, flying through the graveyard only to crash into a headstone was a large beast. It had black fur, glowing red eyes and moved with unearthly speed and strength as its odor mixed with that of death itself. What are you, beast? The supernatural dog snarled as it tried to stand on its legs. The creature only seemed to hiss in response. Curse you to the pits of hell. As it once more tried to attack the beast only to be slashed with its tails. Whatever the beast was, it was immune to the hellhound's death stare. Throughout its centuries of afterlife, the creature have never met such a beast. Decades of hunting down basilisks or tracking Hydra, this beast could not be identified. Though before the hellhound could attack again, the creature unhinged its jaws and launched at the canine, swallowing the demon dog whole. Excellent, my pet. Now it's time we head to Japan for the next mark. The Council of 15 is still unaware, but that will only remain that way for a short time. I need a patsy. Maybe I should contact that witch my cousin told me about. Hell. That was the only way to describe what Naruto had been feeling the past few days. Why the hell did he assume that an all-girls school would be a good place for employment? For heaven's sake, he should have known better considering his life. And those damn provocative daydreams weren't helping manners either. As such, he hadn't been really getting so much sleep the past few days. He was grading papers at the moment, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes with his thumb and fingers when he began drifting off again. You seem so stiff. Winnie's voice purred in his ears as she massaged his shoulders. Why don't you let me help take care of your little problem? She said as her hand snaked around his torso and went to his crotch. Naruto shook himself away from the daze. He didn't think a lack of sexual relief would drive him this crazy. Hey sensei, why don't you show me how much of an animal you are? Winnie said as she hopped up on the desk, her plump rear facing him as she mounted the desk on all fours. Her fur was just so soft and her lower lips pink and inviting. He groaned as his erection threatened to tear the seams of his pants. Moving behind her, he used one hand to free the mass as he used his other hand to tease her lower lips and worked her up. So consumed by his own slut, he slid his painfully throbbing shaft into her hot cunt, earning a strained yet pleasurable grunt from the girl. Naruto let out a breath of relief as he pushed himself deeper into her vaginal sheath, too consumed about achieving his own relief to worry about his companion's comfort. Her rear fur tickled his crotch slightly, but the tightness kept him drawn in as he began plowing away. As his thrusts became harder and faster, the desk began to squeak as the young girl began howling as the sound of their bodies lapped together echoed throughout the room. Sensei. Naruto was brought out of the daydream by Winnie's voice. I finished cleaning the board. Is there anything else you need me to clean? she asked with that cute little smile of his with her fangs poking out. Damn it, why did it have to sound so suggestive? Nothing, just go about your day. I have to go. Naruto said as he dashed out of the room to take a nice long cold shower. Hey there Suga. Got a second? Fanty called out to Naruto, who had to suppress a groan. The girl was in a complex stretching position with her legs behind her head. Am I doing this stretch right? She asked as Naruto merely nodded dumbly. Damn, that girl was pretty flexible. He couldn't help but drift off, and to think about a fantastic lover, she would be thoughts of her on her back in a lewd wanton position. That's it. She coed as his hands groped along her body as he relentless pounded into her. Her hands gripping the sheets as the bed squeaked. Closer, she said as she raised her legs up and through Naruto, making the legs themselves intangible, but her feet tangible as they locked around Naruto's head. Something which would have definitely freaked most guys out, but he was too damn occupied about thoughts of getting off to worry about it. Hey, you okay? Fanty asked, popping up from her position and floating a few inches away from him. You look sort of pale, coach. Sorry, I got to go. He said, speeding off to the direction of his room. Wonder what's wrong with him? Fanty mumbled to herself. After half an hour later, Naruto emerged from the shower relaxed and calm. He was definitely feeling better. He looked outside and gazed around when he noticed Elsa was swimming in the moat outside. She was wearing a blue one-piece suit that showed off her figure. Unfortunately, the young girl splashing around in the water started stirring those urges he thought he took care of him. Once more his mind was filled with thoughts of lust. The thoughts of revealing her round fleshy mounds to him. The thought of breasts with large green nipples. The thought of flicking and pinching the nipples until they harden. Along with the thoughts of taking her nipples into his mouth, sucking and swirling his tongue around the nipple. How does this feel? He asked, dipping a finger into her pussy, and a moment later pulled it back out covered in juices. Naruto wasted no time in teasing her clit, using 2 fingers to gingerly rub the small nub while using 2 fingers from his other hand to tease her lips. Imagining the taste of honey from her juices. What the hell is wrong with me? Naruto asked himself as he stepped away from the window. Damn it, I need to find some way to take care of this. He said as he went out to take a jog. Getting dressed in his jogging gear, Naruto began stretching. Starting off slowly, Naruto took a sharp 90-degree turn to punt Kurama into the moat before going on to his jog. Why, you may ask? No reason, he was just feeling particularly douchy at the moment. Hey there, coach. Going for a jog? Sabella in bat form asked him as she floated close behind him. Yes, and nothing else. He said as he tried to keep focus, as he tried to keep his mind focus and not drifting off into anything dirty. 4 hours, that's how long he spent traveling around the area as he tried to tire himself out. After finally tiring himself out as he let himself collapse on the bed. He closed his eyes and began to drift off when he felt something quite nice happening to his cock. Lifting his head up and opening his eyes, it was none other than the vampire Sabella giving him the pleasurable oral experience. Deciding that he probably wasn't going to be able to relax until he let the dreams run their course, he decided to enjoy it. He groaned as she began bobbing her head up and down his length, taking more and more into her mouth with lewd slurping sounds. A loud moan escaped his lips as he felt his throbbing penis inside her mouth, sucking, then licking, then sucking again. At the very least, he was definitely going to have a good night's sleep. Winnie couldn't put her finger on it, but something seemed different about Sabella. The vampire seemed more competent, smug even whenever they came across each other. Something had happened to the vampire, and whenever Sabella greeted her, it was like there was something on the tip of the vampire's tongue she was dying to exclaim, but kept to herself, and it was simply infuriating that the werewolf didn't have a clue. It's your turn. A voice said, breaking the werewolf out of her thoughts. Oh, sorry. Winnie said as she moved her checker piece. Out of all the others, Winnie got along pretty well with Elsa. So what were you saying? She asked. My pops insists that I get involved into the same scientific field as him, and I'm not sure how to tell him I might not be interested. Just be happy you actually get to spend time with your dad. Because of all these young upstarts challenging him for leadership, I never get to hang out with my dad anymore. I can't remember the last time me and him went hunting, stalking deer and antelope for miles, only to finally corner them and tear them apart. The rush of the hunt. The freshness of their blood. Winnie said as her eyes began to glaze over. It just makes you wanna, and then she howled, which echoed throughout the school. It appears that something sparked Winnie's enthusiasm again. Tenise noted as she sat at the Fanty's bedside that was currently showing off one of her outfits. That's Winnie for you, Suga. Fantasma said as she made herself less transparent. So how's this? She said, showing off an arctic blue version of her usual dress with a slit up one side that stopped just short of the top of her thigh and knee-high white boots with zipper on the shy. A real wower, right? So who's this for exactly? Tenise asked as she brought her knees to her chest. The teach, he's a real cutie, isn't he? Fanti asked as she went transparent and began floating through the air. I think I might be in love, you know. She said airily as she whammed through the air. I mean, I can't even feel my heartbeat whenever I'm in his presence. I'd be concerned, but then I remember you're a phantom. The other monster girl dead nod. Oh yeah, that explains that weird look Elsa gave me when I asked her to check my pulse. Fanti said as she floated down to her bed. It's a real scream to ask when the person doesn't know you. The look on their faces is simply to die for. She said as she rolled over to her back. Tenise shook her head. Fantasma giggled, sorry, force of habit. Something all of us girls did because it was funny at first, but one of us, who I shall not say because she will be remained nameless as she is still blamed, would not stop with the puns, so we all keep on doing them in hopes to annoy the others into stopping, and well, as you can see, that didn't work. Naruto rubbed his face as he tried to wake himself up. He felt drained for some reason. That last little vivid daydream seemed so damn real. Anyway, it was time for him to go refill his water bottle. Shaking his face, he overstepped one of the steps and he threw out his hand trying to clutch onto something and stop his fall, but he found himself unable to as he ended up colliding with someone. His hand on reflex squeezed what was in his hand a few times as a moan reached his ears. Wait a minute. Moan. He hopped up to his feet immediately as his face was flush. Laying on her side was a very flustered. Oh crap, Elsa, I'm so sorry. I didn't see you and I didn't mean to. I didn't hurt you, did I? He asked just as flustered. And no, I'm fine. She said as she reached out for the banister to the stairs. Being a monster of her type, Elsa had great strength and durability, but she didn't have the flexibility or agility like many monsters. Because of how she was built, it would take a lot to knock over a monster of her kind, so the person in question would have to be exceptionally strong to knock one of them over or to have caught them off guard per the way only Naruto could. Let me help you, he said, knowing of Elsa's condition. In fact, as their coach, he was given access to their medical files, considering how unique all the girls were. Placing one arm under her armpit and the other around her torso as he helped her up. I'm sorry, really, he said as Elsa looked down. It was an accident. No problems, coach, she said, waving it off to hide her embarrassment. Seeing Naruto so flustered, Elsa couldn't help but smile, thinking about how cute the blonde was. Then again, unlike the others, there wasn't very many of her species, so there were laxer expectations on a mate. I actually have some questions I want to ask you. There's these positions I can't quite get into as I'm not limber enough. Could you help me? She asked as Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. I'm okay, he said as Elsa grabbed his hand and led him up the stairs. Okay, there's plenty of stretching room in my room. Unknown to the blonde, he was being currently watched from the sanctity of a cave. That human is more resistant than I thought. It looks like I'll have to double the amount of his dosages if I'm going to sway his dreams. Revolta grumbled to herself as she began working on the potion. The pickle-like creeper pushed the necessary potion ingredients to the forefront of the table. The girl seemed to fancy him, so he'll be the perfect bait, she thought as she brewed the potion. Once it was ready, she summoned one of her pet bats and gave it the command to pour the contents into the blonde's water bottle. As long as the other bat was keeping an eye on the blonde, she would be able to watch the blonde's every move through its eyes. And with that, she was one step closer to achieving her goals. Hey coach, sorry to drop in on ya, Winnie greeted with a cheeky grin. The two were currently outside where the werewolf happened to have fallen on Naruto when she was leaping down from the tree. Yeah, do you mind getting off me? He said, feeling the heat of her body and feeling of his bosom were bringing about those damn vivid daydreams and messing with his concentration. Oh. Sorry about that, she said, doing a backflip into a crouch into all fours before standing up. So what's today plan? She asked, hooking her arms under her chest as her tail waved cutely side to side. Naruto paused and thought about it. Winnie had a lot of stamina, was quick, and had aptitude for being acrobatic. Not to mention she was probably used to tough terrain and would have excellent breath control due to the speed and distances that most lichen would hone after years of hunting prey. Well, now that I'm finally getting some one-on-one time with you girls, I want to focus on your strength and weaknesses. I plan on doing so by having you do particular exercises, mixing them up so to speak to see how your muscles develop and a few other things. From what I understand, you're fast and flexible, so we're going to work on exercises on improving that flexibility while strengthening those muscles, so you up for that? I'm up for anything you want me to do, coach, she responded with a toothy grin. Damn it. Why does everything this girl says always sound so damn suggestive? He thought as he made a motion for her to follow him. Moving to an area not too far from the castle, he set up a blanket and a chair and placed down a couple of bottles of waters. After having her stretch for a bit, he then began explaining the name of some of exercises. He then proceeded to give a demonstration. Now this is not only going to be tough, but going to take some time to get the exercises down pat. he said as he demonstrated the first size, the commando push-up. He then instructed her to lay flat on her stomach on the mat as he went step by step through the directions. You push up and then do a knee tuck with one leg and lay back down. Then push up and do a knee tuck with the other leg. In other words, you lay back down between each tuck. After doing a couple of push-ups, Naruto instructed her to roll over once and repeat the exercise. Upon seeing her push up with her upper body first, he stopped her. If you want to get the most of this exercise, try to push your body up at once. You aren't challenging yourself if you go chest first then hips. Also be sure to bring your knee forward the moment you push up to maximum height. Normally for beginners you would push yourself up using your knees, which would be resting on the mat, but I think you can handle this. This is child's play. Winnie spouted confidently. What else you got? Oh, you won't be thinking that for long. Trust me, the blonde said as a grin began forming on his face. Heading to his truck, Naruto returned back with a simple black bag filled with sand. This is a sandbag. The exercises with this piece of equipment are used for strength exercises and building muscle. Because of how it changes shape as you lift along with weight, it's a unique exercise tool that helps you use muscles you wouldn't ordinarily use, he said, tossing it to her feet. Grab it by the handles, then hoist it behind you, he said as he fixed her stance. Now you point your knees and feet slightly outward. And as you squat down you push your hips back, keep your back straight and move your rear below your knees, he said, keeping his hand to the small of her back as she followed his direction. Now you push off with your heels and stand up, he said as she slowly followed his direction. And once you complete that you bring one leg up, knee first, then extend your leg in a kick. Not just an outright kick, but a push kick which activates the muscles more by using your hips and the core by pushing. After a few minutes of trial and error which fixing Winnie's posture, they finally went on to the next exercise, which was a simple knee tuck. Now for the next half hour you'll be doing 10 sets of 15 reps of each exercise, with a 35-second rest period in between. Hope you don't think this is too easy. To Winnie's misfortune, the exercises were not as easy as she easily dismissed them as. She was far too confident that her natural dexterity as a werewolf would allow her to blow through the exercises, but when she found out during the process that there were quite a few muscles that weren't used, she found herself becoming sore quite quickly. Once his time with Winnie was over, Naruto went over to the next student. Naruto-sensei, what are humans like? Tenise asked as she continued the exercises. I'm not sure what you mean. You're going to have to be a little more specific. Well, I hear a lot of things about humans. Like how they hate and hunt our kind, but there are some that are sympathetic. Some that even likes us and wants to be turned. Mostly by vampires and werewolves though, she said as Naruto shrugged. Well yeah, it's true. It's more of a general consensus of what you know and what kind of people you have run-ins with. People are more accepting of vampires and werewolves because of all those trashy romance adaptations that ruin things and make them into mostly sexual beings in their 20-somethings, mostly stuff that young and dumb teenagers eat up. So it's about looks. She spoke up a little softer, her head hanging towards the water. Yeah, but not all humans are superficial bastards, Naruto said as he placed his finger on her chin and lifted her face up. But they can see someone's inner beauty. Don't worry about it, okay? Oh, why yeah. Tenise stuttered as a faint blush appeared on her bandaged cheeks. Now this was a head scratcher, so to speak. Naruto sat on a chair as he tried to figure out what would work out with Fantasma. She was a phantom, so she didn't have muscle mass, nor could she put on muscle. Though it appeared she had rather limitless energy, but what could be done with that besides being a runner? Yeah, he was going to have to come back later with something. Naruto's first day of teaching social and human skills went relatively smooth. The girl seemed quite enthralled by all the holidays of human culture and some of the technology he mentioned. In hindsight, revealing the existence of cell phones to teenage monster girls wouldn't have been the dumbest thing he did. After breakfast, the girls went to their separate classes and learned their different lessons. When it was time for the girls to move from one class to the next, the floating hand would bang a gong and they would travel through the halls. Once or twice, Winnie saw Sabella out of the corner of the eye and the Batgirl was acting rather strangely. She was sending the wolf girl a strange look every time they passed in the halls, but then again she was sending everyone strange looks. Though when Winnie did take notice of Sabella, her long, drawn-out hungry stares unnerved her quite a bit, to the point Winnie was sure Sabella was just trying to freak her out, so she was going to confront about it. No, not now, anytime but now, Sabella said with a groan as she clutched her stomach. She was out in the forest and leaning against a tree as intense hunger pangs attacked her stomach. All this morning her fangs were throbbing and intense pain was coming from her stomach. All she could thirst for was blood, and it took all her self-control to not drain her companions by. Hey Sabella. What's up with you and those freaky looks? Winnie's shout startled the poor girl. No, she whispered, her face going paler than usual as the thirst was growing too strong. Get away, before it's too late. What was that? What the hell are, the orange-haired didn't finish her statement as the vampire lunged at her. Winnie dodged to the side as Sabella's claws narrowly missed her throat. You crazy bat. What the hell is your problem? She demanded with a snarl, which was cut short when she noticed Sabella's eyes. They were red and the bloodlust rolling off her was intoxicating. Shit, Winnie silently swore as she realized that Sabella was experiencing bloodlust. Sabella lunged at her again, to which Winnie dodged by jumping over the girl. Despite colliding with the ground and getting her dress dirty, the bloodlusting vampire would not be denied. Knowing that she wouldn't win in a straight-up fight while Sabella was in this state, Winnie took off in the direction of the school. Sabella might have been stronger, but Winnie was faster. Unfortunately for Winnie, she was exhausted from waking up early in the morning and doing exercises she read up on Naruto's computer. Unknown to the others, Winnie's mother wasn't a conventional lichen but a shifter, a shapeshifter of sorts. Because of that, despite acting ignorant on the subject, Winnie knew quite a bit about technology but was sent to Grimwood School for Girls because of her monster heritage. Because she looked like a wolf girl and hadn't mastered the gift of shifting she inherited from her mother, she wasn't able to interact with humans completely. Not counting the Caraway boys and the Colonel, there was still quite a bit she hadn't known. Another thing about Winnie was that she was a bit nosy by nature. Overhearing a discussion between the Kyuubi and her coach, the latter seemed to have a thing for girls with big rear ends. Henceforth she hopped on the computer and started doing exercises that promised a tighter and rounder backside, leaving her legs tired and sore, as many forum and discussions stated that you didn't do enough of the exercise unless you were tired and sore after the workout, and since today Naruto was teaching them on human culture, Winnie thought she would have a day of rest. How wrong she was. With a yelp she was tackled to the ground. Quickly flipping over, Winnie threw her hands up around the vampire's throat to prevent her from biting her. Damn it, Batgirl. Snap out of it. Winnie tried to get through with Sabella, who fought against Winnie, her mouth edging ever closer to Winnie's neck. But Sabella's nails dug into her hand. Winnie let out a roar as she felt her arms giving away from the pain. No, not like this, I don't want to die like this. Winnie had always been brash and boastful. Always jumping head first into something, consequences never coming to her mind. The same girl who always laughed at the notion of fear now knows what the notion was, but she wouldn't give in to it. While others may have begged or cried, Winnie was a fighter and was determined as hell to fight to her last breath. Her pride as a werewolf wouldn't have allowed any less. So when a body out of nowhere collided with Sabella's head, shocked the girl. Winnie. Get out of here now. Go get the others. It took her a few moments to gather her wits and realized it was none other than Naruto. Go, now. Still in shock, Winnie nodded and made her way back to the castle. Naruto found himself tossed off by the vampire's strength as she lashed at him, to which he was able to sway out of the way. He really wished he had gone into sage mode before arriving. He noticed enough of Sabella's behavior to conclude it was weird, but this wasn't what he was expecting. Naruto carefully watched a young girl drop down to her knees and let out a pitiful whimper. Creating a Kajabunchen, Naruto had it approach the girl only for it to lash out and destroy it with a single blow. Creating several more and seemingly restraining the girl, Naruto considered tying her up, but quickly changed his mind as explaining why he tied up one of his students would be a little too awkward. Unfortunately, Naruto had underestimated the girl's strength and speed as she yanked from the clone's grasp and latched onto his throat. No matter how much experience he had with other shinobi and demons, what he knew of monsters were from movies and literature, from what he soon came to learn weren't accurate. Some sort of substance entered his body and left the blonde paralyzed, falling to the ground, leaving him at the vampire's mercy. Sitting in one of the beds of the infirmary, Sabella felt ashamed. She wiped her mouth, from which still had the taste of Naruto's blood lingered in her mouth. Thankfully, Gem was also a qualified medic and was able to administer a cure to the toxin Sabella injected into his system. It was something vampires made in their bodies to paralyze certain creatures that couldn't be enthralled by a vampire's sexuality or hypnotism. As much as she wanted to be disgusted, she couldn't help but notice how delicious Naruto's blood was and wanted more. It filled her with energy, far more than tomato super blood packs ever could. Then she was also ashamed at what she had done to Naruto, what the blonde was probably clueless of. Once were returned to her father, she would surely be punished, along with the fact Naruto would probably want nothing to do with her. 2 days had passed since the incident, and Sabella had to stay in the infirmary, feeding on packs until the hunger subsided. Since she had such a large quantity 2 days ago, the feeding time had subsided quite a bit. Though over the course of the 2 days the girls had all visited her, even Winnie, who surprised Sabella as she was sure the wolf girl would want nothing to do with her after the incident. Don't think you can scare me away with fangs and glowing red eyes, Batgirl. Trust me, I know when instinct kicks in and how you can lose control. Though, that supposes that puts me one up you on getting coach. Winnie's smug tone during all of it only serves to irritate the vampire, resulting them breaking down into an argument. Sabella was grateful for that, and the final icing on the cake was when Naruto visited her and assured her that he didn't hate her. Well, that made Sabella feel better for the time being. She was sure he wouldn't feel that way when he learned the truth, which she was too afraid to tell him. Though that did mean from now on animals like crows, bats, and the like would be caught and caged for Sabella to feed on in case the thirst ever came back. Soon things went back into a groove as things went back to normal. "Miss Grimwood, open up," he called while knocking the door. "It's Colonel Calloway." Miss Grimwood looked up. She was still in the process of untangling Tenise, who got tied up during the exercises. "Would you get the door, Sabella?" she asked. "Okay, Miss Grimwood," Sabella said, holding her hair up like a cape and transforming into a bat and flying off to let Colonel Calloway in. The door then opens, which surprises Colonel Calloway, as it looked like it opened by itself. He then poked his head inside, looking around. "Miss Grimwood," he called. "Anybody home?" He then looked inside and was startled when the bat form of Sabella flew up to his face, resulting him stumbling back and trying to protect his face. He then pushed a hand out to try and shoo her away. "Stay back," he said in fright. At that moment, Sabella returned to human form. "Anything you say, Colonel Calloway," Sabella said, prompting the colonel to open his eye to see where that voice came from, noticing Sabella. "Huh?" he asked as he opened both eyes. Where did you come from, young lady?" "Oh," Sabella said. Up there," she said, holding her hands up, looking up. She then returned her gaze to Colonel Calloway. "Miss Grimwood said to make yourself comfortable. She'll be down as soon as she wraps things up," she said, leading Colonel Calloway through a door. Then, she turned back into a bat behind his back. "Affirmative," he said as he turned to face her. "Thank you, young lady," he said, frightened at the sight of Sabella as she flew off. "This school must have bats in its belfry," he said, walking backwards and tugging on the collar of his shirt. He then stopped walking backwards, noticing a chair with purple mattresses and a small wooden demon head with wings on top. He ran his finger along the armrest of the chair, inspecting it. He said as he examined the dust on his finger. "Could stand a little spit and polish." With that, he then sat in the chair. At that moment, metallic clasps came out of the back and armrests of the chair, closing around his torso, arms, and wrists. At that moment, Miss Grimwood walked into the room. "Ah, Colonel Calloway," she said. "It's so nice to have you here." "Miss Grimwood," Colonel Calloway said, struggling to get out of the chair. "This chair, it's..." "Ah, yes," Miss Grimwood said. "It's a collector's item. Early Inquisition, but not very comfy, I'm afraid. Would you prefer a softer chair?" She then helped Colonel Calloway out of the clasps, holding him in place. Thanks, Miss Grimwood," Colonel Calloway stuttered as he got out of the chair, rubbing the kinks out of his sore back. He walked over to another chair, exactly like the last chair he sat in. He thoroughly inspected the chair, the seat, head, back, and underside to make sure there weren't any clasps, restraints, etc. that'd spring once he sat in the chair. After he was done, he sat down in the chair with a little reluctance. "Now, how about some tea and sweets?" Miss Grimwood asked once Colonel Calloway was seated, taking a seat herself. Negative, Miss Grimwood," Colonel Calloway said. "I'm on a strict military diet." "Nonsense," Miss Grimwood said, raising her hand. "You must try my fudge." With that, she hit a gong next to her with a stick with a white ball on it, summoning a purple octopus carrying a tray with fudge on it, as well as a plate with a cup on it and 2 tentacles, and a teapot in another tentacle. The octopus held the fudge tray to Calloway. "I made it this morning," Miss Grimwood said. "Well, if you insist," Colonel Calloway said, taking a piece of fudge. The octopus poured a cup of tea and handed it to Miss Grimwood as she ate a piece of fudge. Millimeters, Miss Grimwood said, eating the fudge. "Delicious. If I do say so myself." Colonel Calloway bit into his fudge and ate some. He then made scrutinizing looks on his face as he ate. "Doesn't it taste a little, Colonel Calloway said, chewing and swallowing his fudge. "Moldy." "Why, of course, Colonel," Miss Grimwood said. She said, chewing on her fudge and swallowing. "Fungus fudge always tastes moldy," she explained as the octopus wiped her mouth. The colonel's face then twisted into a rather large shock. "Fungus fudge?" he said in shock, causing him to drop the part of the fudge he didn't eat. So, to try and wash the taste from his mouth, Colonel Calloway guzzled down his tea. While he was drinking, Matches noticed the part of his fudge Calloway didn't eat caught it as it fell to the ground. "Yes, it goes so well with toadstool tea," Miss Grimwood said. Colonel Calloway gulped and looked into his teacup. "Toadstool tea?" Colonel Calloway said, once again in shock, causing him to drop his cup onto the dragon. "Ow," he thought in discomfort when the plastic cup landed on his head. The raven-haired woman saw this, but saw it as something else. "More tea, Colonel?" She questioned politely to the man, not noticing his disgusted face. "Negative, Miss Grimwood," he said back to her while waving his hands in front of him to emphasize his point. "I think it's time we arranged our annual volleyball game," he said to the woman before him since he wanted to get to the point and get out as soon as possible. "My cadets are looking forward to winning again this year," the colonel said, not knowing that the new visitor has moved from his first position. The moment he said that, the heat on his posterior began to rise. "Isn't it getting a bit warm in here?" he questioned, not knowing that there was a lit blowtorch beneath him. "It's going to get a lot hotter on the volleyball court, Colonel," the headmistress said to the headmaster after getting up out of her chair and closer to him in an intimidating way. "We've got a new coach and I'd like you to meet him." At this, the purple octopus reached for a nearby rope, pulling it, causing a large bell to ring. This signaled Naruto to come down. However, as he walked down the stairs turned into a large slide, which Naruto to slide down. As he slid by the octopus, however, it reached out and grabbed them, stopping him from sliding further away. "Naruto, I'd like you to meet Colonel Calloway," Miss Grimwood said as the octopus helped Naruto to his feet. "Hello," he said to his fellow man, now really feeling warm in his buttocks, forcing him to leap from the chair because of such unbearable heat. Hello," Naruto greeted, wondering what the fuck he just saw. "Bad boy, matches," she said to her old friend, and knew that that was enough. "So Miss Grimwood told me you have an annual volleyball before you get down to the main event, so the girls are ready to play, and we're ready anytime." "Affirmative," Colonel Calloway said. "We'll rendezvous on your field in exactly 1400 hours tomorrow." Once he was done cooling his butt, Colonel Calloway brought up his wrist that had the watch on it. "Synchronize watches," he instructed to them while reaching for the old-fashioned wristwatch on his right wrist. 2 o'clock, got it. It was tomorrow at 2, no reason for the needless synchronization. "Jack, over and out," Colonel Calloway said, saluting. He then turned and walked off, smoke still coming off his butt. "Oh my, it seems as if the colonel's already getting warmed up to play." Miss Grimwood turned to face Naruto. "You'd better start getting the girls ready, Naruto," she said. "After today I think they're ready. Might as well let them rest for the rest of the day as we don't want them overworked. Some light exercise and stretches tomorrow and they'll be ready." Naruto concluded with a shrug as he made his way onto the room, lightly rubbing the marks where Sabella's fangs pierced his neck. And deep shrieking, Naruto urged the girls as they were getting pumped up. Every day they grew a little bit stronger and a little bit faster. When the day came they were going to go home with the gold. Various howls, shrieks, and screams came from the girls as a mishmash symphony of inharmonious voices rung out through the sky. "I hate all this screaming," the vulture to the left commented to his partner. "Me too. I'm flapping out," the other said, surprised that their earmuffs did nothing to stop the noise. With that the two took their suitcases, which they liberated from a pair of tourists, and flew away from the haunted house. The birds and the gargoyles were not the only ones that heard the screams. The cadets did as well. "That a load of that racket coming from the Grimwood place," Tug informed the others as they were doing toe touches, one of the routine's toe exercises. "Phew. And I thought Calloway was tough, but it sounds like those girls over there are being tortured," Jamal said as the shrieks and screams coming from the Grimwood campus was a bit unnerving. The muscle of their team, a rather large boy by the name Grunt, stated, "No pain, no gain." Continuing his weighted push-ups that were sacks on his back, he followed up with, "More weight, Baxter," he requested to his fellow cadet who was simply standing beside 2 more bags. I, Grunt," the smallest of the teens said as he lifted as best as he could one of the 2 bags and tossed it on the other 2 on his friend's back. "More weight," the big one commented as when it came to the events it was his muscle that allowed him to get an edge on the strength trails. While he wasn't able to out-muscle Elsa or Sabella, his strength more than easily outpaced the other girls combined. "Here comes the colonel. Attention," the relation of TJ commented when he saw the man clad in blue uniform showed up. Baxter heard this and saluted, unconsciously tossing the last bag up in the air, which crashed down and slammed the training one into the ground. "At ease, men," the man said, causing the 4 visible members to stand down. It was not until they did that he saw the 5th one still saluting, so he added, "I said, at ease, Grunt." "Thank you, sir," the 5th one said back before collapsing into the hole in the ground. Their leader then focused on the task at hand, the annual volleyball game before the games. "I just want to say, no matter what happens on the volleyball court this afternoon," he started to say calmly before glancing down at the trophy, one of them he had chosen from the dozens that been acquired from the years. "You've got to win. This year we must blow those Grimwood girls out of the water." The 4 of them practically felt an increase in wind after he said that last part. "Yes, sir," the ones above ground shouted in an obedient tone. "Do you want this trophy to stay at Calloway Military School?" he questioned, his voice firm and commanding. "Affirmative," We won't let you down, sir. The field leader said to his commanding officer. 1400 hours approaches. Prepare to engage the enemy. Their teacher said to them after clearing his throat and ended with him pointing at the doorway. The moment he said that, the fifth one leapt out of the hole and tackled a stack of 3 sacks. Those Grimwood girls won't know what hit them. Grunt stated. The next day rolled around. Everyone was ready to see how this year's game was going to turn out. Then let the games begin. Grimwood cheered as she stood beside Colonel Calloway. Negative, Miss Grimwood. This volleyball court is a disaster area. You don't even have a net. He complained, ending with a gesture to 2 posts, but nothing in between them. Not yet. She corrected him before looking over her right shoulder and shouted, legs. With that shout, a hairy 8-legged beast cut off the walking boulder on his way to the court. The spider climbed up one of the posts and began to create a net with little to no effort. You were saying, Colonel? Naruto asked. The colonel was taken aback by what had just happened. I was saying this court doesn't have any boundary lines. The colonel then stuttered. Coming right up. Miss Grimwood replied. She then lifted up a gong and hit it with a stick. The octopus butler then came along with a ground painter, painting the boundary lines on the court. Any other complaints, Colonel? The blonde asked as he was quite anxious to see the girls' training pay off. Well. The colonel then said. We need a referee. Well then, Naruto said as he made a cross with his fingers out of habit. The area was soon filled with smoke which faded and filled with Naruto's. What the devil? Uzumaki, Naruto's ready to referee, they all chimed as one. You 2 over there on the other side of the court and you 3 over, the original directed the clones so they could watch the game from all angles. It was then suggested they flip a coin to see who went first. When the coin landed on heads, it was decided that Grimwood would go first. Alright girls, show what you got. The original shouted from the sidelines as he sat down in a lawn chair he had brought. Bring home the trophy. The words of encouragement began to pump up the girls. The first going up to the serve was Elsa. Alright Elsa. Naruto started. Time to put that impressive strength of yours to use. With minimal injuries, okay? He quickly added, remembering the last time he was on the receiving end of one of Elsa's serves, he was knocked out cold for 2 hours. Alright, coach. Elsa replied as she lightly blushed in embarrassment. She then readied the ball for a serve when electricity sparked in her neck bolts. She then tossed the ball up and prepared a powerful serve, sending the ball flying right into the net, breaking a hole through it. The ball then continued flying forward as it hit Tuck and Grunt, knocking them off their feet. Net ball. One of the clones said as he pointed to the net. I'd say it's a net loss. Miguel said, looking at the net. Affirmative. Jamal replied, also looking at the broken net. Legs. Miss Grimwood called. On the double. Legs then walked over, leapt onto the hole made in the net, and repaired it. Another clone handed the ball back to Elsa. Nice try for a first hit, Elsa. He said. Let's make it over the next this time. Alright, she said as she readied another serve, had electricity charge through her neck, and served the ball high into the air. Nice hit. Winnie commented as the ball began drifting down from above. I got it. Baxter shouted, jumping around underneath the oncoming ball, before it hit him so hard he was buried into the ground. I mean, I had it. He muttered. Point to Grimwood's school. The original Naruto said. The disembodied hand then placed a 1 next to Grimwood's name on the scoreboard. Way to go. Grimwood. Several clones cheered from a makeshift bench they made. And with a time skip, we now come to a 10-point to 10-point tie game. Good serve, Cadet. Colonel Calloway said to Grunt as he received the ball, patting Grunt on the shoulder. Keep pressing the attack. Yes sir. Grunt said, then turned to the field and ran toward it. Rah. He growled as he made a powerful serve. Ah ha ha, I got it. Fanty shouted as she went through the net and hit the ball, making it bounce on Calloway's side of the field. Hey. Miguel shouted, pointing at Fanty. She hit the net. Hit it? Jamal asked. She went through it. Howl on Grimwood. A Naruto clone said as he resisted the urge to facepalm as he noticed Fantasma already looked disappointed. Sorry girls, but it looks like Calloway gets the point. All the way with Calloway. The Calloway cadets cheered, putting their hands in a circle and throwing them up as the disembodied hand put an 11 next to Calloway's name on the scoreboard. Looking dejected, Tenise looked over to Sabella and said. We're never gonna win that trophy, Sabella. You bet we are. An enthusiastic Sabella said, then screeched, turning into a bat and flew up to the next, spiking a ball right over Tuck, bouncing on the ground right behind him. Alright, great spike, Sabella. The original Naruto commented as he clapped his hands. Sabella flew back to her spot on the volleyball field and transformed back into a vampire. She then looked up at Naruto as her face went red and she looked to the ground. Thanks, coach. She said, still unable to look him in the face. Deciding to get her mind back into the game, she walked over to a bewildered Tuck and took the ball off him. Our serve, Cadet. she said, walking back to her side of the field with the ball in her hands. Tuck stared at her for a while before he managed to get another word in. I must be going batty, he said, rubbing his eyes before looking at Sabella again. Sabella handed the ball to Tenise. Here, Tenise, she said. Let's see a fantastic serve. With that, Tenise then served the ball, with a bit of her tape getting caught on the ball. I got it, Miguel shouted, reaching for the ball at the same time as Jamal. Both of them shouted as the ball flew towards them. However, as they got ready to hit the ball, the wrappings pulled the ball back over to Tenise, causing her to volley it again at the both of them. I got it, they shouted as they dove for the ball, only to have it pulled back to Tenise a second time. I got it, Tenise said as she caught the ball in her hands. As for Miguel and Jamal, they both dove into the net, resulting in it being brought down and the poles being broken. A Naruto clone pointed at the two boys. Alright, you two hit the net, so point for Grimwood. Hand, the disembodied hand floated over to the scoreboard and placed an 11 next to Grimwood's name. And now the scores are tied. Winnie let out a howl of joy as Fantasma let out a spectral laugh. Oh, we have this in the bag. Oh, Legs. Miss Grimwood called, pointing over at the net. Legs scuttled over to the net, but upon seeing it, crossed his arms and shook his bed back and forth. I'll give you 6 extra flies for supper, Miss Grimwood said. However, this didn't seem to faze Legs, who once again crossed his arms and shook his head. Alright, a dozen flies, Miss Grimwood then said. This seemed to work, as Legs immediately got to work, fixing up the poles and stringing together a whole new net. Once it was done, the game could continue. The original Naruto was getting quite hungry, followed the smell of something cooking. It was none other than Matches working a red hot hot dog box. Kick ass, the pocket monster is selling food. Hey Matches, I'll take one. After Naruto paid for his hot dog, the blonde was about to take a bite when Kurama came out of fucking nowhere and snatched it from his hands with his teeth. Naruto was dumbfounded for a few moments, his only thought was, what the fuck did I just see? Before he finally gathered his wits. Meanwhile, the Callaway cadets were all huddled around Tuck, who was holding a red remote control. They won't be winning for long, Tuck said. I've planted a remote control device in the volleyball. Affirmative, Miguel said as they put their hands in the circle on top of each other. Goodbye Grimwood, Grunt said sinisterly. Tenise now had the ball. She dribbled it a few times and serves it, once again with her bandages attached to it. It sailed right over Elsa's head and the net. Looks good, Tenise, Elsa said, watching the ball. I'll make it look bad, Tuck said, pressing some buttons on the control, causing the ball to fly straight up as Miguel was about to hit it. That serve is loco, Miguel said. The ball then flew so far that it dragged Tenise up into the sky with her. Boo-oy-oy, Tenise cried as she soared into the sky. Out of bounds. A Naruto clone as he ducked out of the way of the rocketed Tenise. Holy crap. The ball and Tenise were both launched up into a tree and landing on a branch. The ball got out of Tenise's wrapping and fell into Tuck's hands. Then it's Callaway's ball, he said, and then returned to the court. Yet something didn't sit right with him about how the ball reacted, but right now what mattered was helping Tenise down so the game could continue. Everyone was unaware of the Callaways cheating, so the game took an unusual turn. Jamal dribbled the ball and then served it. Winnie went up to hit it. Alright, I got this, the werewolf shouted with exuberance. Tuck then used the remote, laughing, to make the ball stop in midair in front of Winnie, surprising her. Huh? She asked. She attempted to hit the ball. It immediately leaped over her head, causing her to miss and land face first on the ground. I'll save it, Winnie, Sabella said, reaching for the ball. However, when the ball was within Sabella's reach, it began to spin around her, tangling her in her own hair. Oh, what a backspin, Sabella said as she spun. Once she was tied in her hair, the ball bounced on the ground, gaining Callaway another point. As this went on, Kurama randomly went flying through the air. He let out a hell of a screech as he bumped into Jamal, causing the boy to drop back and the remote to fly out of his hand and down the creature's throat. Tuck looked up at Jamal crossly. Nice work, Jamal, he said, pointing up at Jamal. Now our remote control is AWOL. The ball bounced towards Colonel Callaway, hitting him in the face and knocking his hat off his head. Not only do we lose the ball, but I lose my hat, he shouted, rubbing his head as Kurama hiccuped. Colonel Callaway bent down to pick up his hat, but the ball bounced over and hit him on the ass, causing him to fall flat on his face. The ball then bounced back into a Naruto clone's hand. The game soon continued without much evidence as the Grimwood girls were back in the game. Winnie went to serve. She tossed the ball into the air and smacked the ball with a hell of a slam, sending it sailing over the net with a victorious howl. Baxter and Tuck tried to hit the ball, but they both missed it, falling on top of each other as the ball bounced off the ground, scoring a goal for Grimwood. The disembodied hand placed a 16 next to Grimwood's name on the scoreboard, making the score 16-17. Later still, after more scores made, Grunt was up to make the serve. All the way with Calloway. Grunt called, serving the ball. Tenise tried to hit the ball back, but couldn't reach it in time, causing it to hit the ground, scoring Calloway a point. The disembodied hand placed an 18, then a 19, next to Calloway's name on the scoreboard, tying up the game. Colonel Calloway stared excitedly at the trophy clutched in his hands. 2 more points, men. He shouted in delight. The victory is ours. Tuck got ready to serve the ball. Yeah, we can beat these girls without military assistance, he said as he served the ball. The ball sailed over Baxter's head. Wow. Baxter said in awe, watching the ball fly over him. Elsa then immediately spiked the ball, causing it to hit Calloway's side of the field so hard it drove itself deep into the ground. What a spike. Baxter said in amazement. The ball burst out of the ground right underneath him, coming up so fast it launched the Naruto sitting in the chair up into fucking space. That ball is out of bounds. Colonel Calloway shouted, pointing at the ball. The chair then came back down, in one piece, but the Naruto who was sitting in it was gone forever. It hit in first Colonel. The Naruto who was standing next to the chair pointed out. Grimwood's ball. He stated before he began grieving for his lost brother. Grimwood. 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 The crowd of clones cheered as they waved mini flags. Matches then came up to the only Naruto copy with a goatee and incinerated one of his flags. The goatee Naruto looked at his hand wondering where his flag went. He then looked down at Matches and his eye began to twitch. Hey. He shouted as Matches just laughed at him, which didn't last long. Why you little, he started as he began strangling Matches. Meanwhile, Avina Spytrap watched the game going on, seeing the Grimwood girls in action. Winnie let loose a howl as she got on Elsa's shoulders and returned an oncoming ball. The ball hit Miguel, knocking him into Jamal, knocking them both to the ground. Ah. Miguel grunted. Ugh. Jamal grunted. Those girls are strong. Revolta. The creeper, a mass oval green cycloptic plant creature, commented from the image on the screen. Just like their parents, creeper. The witch remarked. But soon all that power will be mine. Back at the game, the score was now 20-20. The disembodied hand placed a 20 next to Grimwood's name on the scoreboard, putting Grimwood ahead on the score. Alright, the next point decides it all. Naruto said to the girls as he futzed with his bandaged face. So you got to own them. Plain and simple. He then handed the ball to Sabella. Serve up a good hit, Sabella. You bet I will, Sabella said. Meanwhile, the Calloway cadets were placing a jetpack on Grunt's back. This jetpack will set you up to spike that serve, Grunt. Tuck said. My pleasure. Grunt commented. I'll pulverize him. Sabella threw the ball high into the air and, as it came down, turned into a bat and served it. Grunt came up in the jetpack and spiked the ball back. Take that, you bat. The ball was flying straight for Grimwood ground. I can't reach it. Tenise shouted as she ran toward the ball, which was inches from the ground. The ball stopped right before hitting the ground, flying right back up at Grunt, hitting him in the face, and bouncing off each Calloway cadet's head before hitting the ground on Calloway's side of the field, scoring the point for Grimwood that had ended the game. Naruto pointed over at the ball and Colonel. The ball's out, Colonel, he said. And with this Grimwood wins the game. The disembodied hand placed a 21 next to Grimwood's name on the scoreboard, making the final score Grimwood 21, Calloway 20. Grimwood was ecstatic, running over to Naruto, picking him up and carrying him back to Grimwood, cheering. You were fantastic, coach, Sabella commented. Aw, come on, girls, Naruto commented. You were the ones that kicked ass out there. Speaking of which, who the hell keeps groping my ass? Meanwhile, Miss Grimwood walked over to Colonel Calloway. I believe we get the trophy this year, Colonel Calloway, Miss Grimwood commented. The colonel, however, clutched the trophy tightly. There must be some mistake, he said. I won't hand it over. However, the disembodied hand then floated over and grabbed the trophy, pulling on it from Colonel Calloway's clutches before Colonel Calloway finally released it, allowing the disembodied hand to give it to Miss Grimwood. Thank you, Colonel, Miss Grimwood said, then turned to a recently shown up Tenise. Here, Tenise, Miss Grimwood said, handing Tenise the trophy. For your mummy case. Thanks, Miss Grimwood, Tenise said, very happily. The Calloway cadets, however, were in another boat. I don't get it, Tuck said. We had the tactics. We had the strategy, Jamal said. We had the equipment, Miguel added. But we still lost, Grunt dejectedly remarked. Affirmative, Baxter replied. Colonel Calloway raised a finger to get his cadets' attention. No moping, men, he said. The Calloway Cade says retreat with dignity, besides we will crush them in the main event, he firmly remarked as they made their dignified retreat. It was the eve of the Grimwood school victory of the volleyball. There was much rejoicing and celebration. While being a small thing prior to the overall competition, it served as an important mood uplifter and motivator for the girls. "You girls did an amazing job." Augie congratulated the students as the inhabitants of the mansion went about straightening up the house for the open house. The place was being adorned with all manner of festive decorations, as the main room was being cleared for plenty of room. "This definitely adds a bit of flair to this year's Halloween." Winnie happily replied as she placed a jack-o'-lantern on a counter that she carved using her claws with her fur matted slightly from the thick juice. Her claws also carried the scent of pumpkin, to which she meticulously worked to lick them clean. "I'm so happy that we finally have a trophy to show off at our open house," Tenise announced with a tone filled with glee as she admired the trophy. "Well, good for you, young one," Alia kindly remarked as she affectionately rubbed the mummy girl on top of her head. "Open house?" Naruto asked them as he realized he was a bit uninformed about several of the events of the school. Well, he had heard of open houses before, he had never attended one personally or one he could remember. "It's only the biggest event of the Grimwood school year," Sabella explained to the coach as she hung a skeleton on a hook. Despite the fact that this was something she often looked forward to, she couldn't shake the dread of the eventual talk between her teacher and her father. "It'll be interesting," Aloki said as she placed some spiders on certain parts of the walls so they could do their things and start making webs. "I always wanted to meet some of the council members," she remarked as that drew in Naruto's interest. "Council members?" he repeated as Aloki began her explanation. "A few millennium ago there was a civil war between the various species of monsters. The despites could always be summoned up over matters of pride, power, money, or even food. Though as those disputes began to lessen as certain race of monsters grew in influence and gained stakes of land, there was always one matter that often kept being brought up. And that was the idea of integrating with humans and slowly integrating the two societies, or enslaving them and using them as livestock. Of course, because of how humans bred like rabbits and had the support of angels to eliminate rogue demons, the latter decision wasn't wise. This all goes back to the old times where the earth once belonged to demons and monsterkind, and stories mention that the human ancestors that live on this world had migrated here from a dying dimension, and the humans are more or less borrowing the planet under a stipulation. As long as humans maintain certain expectations which seem to only be known by the highest order of heavenly and hell specters of the planet, then the peace is maintained, and if they fail, then a war between the two break out. What makes humans and monsters integral in regards to the wars between the angels and demons? Well, the reason why the two species are important between the forces of heaven and hell is the fact that our moral conscience acts as a fuel for both sides. For example, the amount of good or evil in a human's heart decides whether the angels or demons are empowered. So certain monster species would see humans as an important factor in influencing the tide between the two sides. Naruto was already theorized scenarios in how opportunists would try to manipulate things to their sides. That is but one of the possibilities. For others who had little love or no real interest in the human race, didn't agree to their food supply being wiped out, or wanted to deal with the destruction of a war between angel and demons, or risk one side turning against monster kind in retaliation. That was until one day, under the leadership of 15 monsters, history was made. Those 15 became legends, and some of those council members in fact make up some of these girls' fathers. In other words, we're having some real live or dead celebrities joining the party. Camila remarked as she pressed her bosom against Naruto's back, who was so absorbed into the story he didn't notice her presence. "What do you think, handsome? I look good enough to eat, right?" she asked as she showed off her cream-colored dress, which was both sleeveless and reached down to her knees with 3-inch black heels. "Eat wouldn't be the term I would use," Naruto remarked as he looked her over. "There will be food, dancing, ooh, I can't wait." Fanty gushed and let out a ghostly shriek as half of her materialized from the ground carrying a butterfly net. "How about you, coach? Are you light on your feet?" To emphasize her pun, Fanty floated a few feet off the ground. "Yeah," he mumbled as he stroked his chin. He couldn't help but feel there was something off. "You seem distracted." Naruto looked up at the doorway and noticed Gem was walking in with a tray of tea. "Maybe some tea will calm the nerves," the soft-spoken headmistress in training suggested as Naruto took a cup and thanked her. "We could always use some help in the kitchen," she added. After taking a long swig from the cup, Naruto nodded and followed Gem into the kitchen where Miss Grimwood was baking brownies. "Alright, matches," Miss Grimwood said as she turned to the green dragon. "Ready to bake a batch of brownies?" "Ree," Matches growled. He then went over to the oven, breathing fire underneath the pan, baking the batter and sending the smell throughout the kitchen. Sabella then wandered into the kitchen, attracted by the smell. Something smells rotten," she said as she took another sniff of the air. "Deliciously rotten," Sabella commented as the disembodied hand brought the finished brownies to her. "Swamp brownies, fresh from the oven. Made with slimy swamp water." Miss Grimwood commented. Chock full of mosquitoes. Naruto raised an eyebrow as he looked over to the bowl that had a bit of batter left over. Thinking back to his brief stint in the forest that would never be named, he ate many things that would be considered worst. What one culture saw unpleasant was a tasty treat to another. Fantasma. Miss Grimwood called for the phantom. Are those caterpillar cookies ready to bake yet? They will be as soon as I catch them. Fantasma laughed, chasing several caterpillars with a net. But the Sai Naruto took out several kunai and flung them with pinpoint accuracy, killing the remarkable fast creatures dead on, making Fantasma's job rather easy. Thanks Naruto. Fantasma laughed. No problem. He remarked. Nothing's too good for our guests. Fantasma cackled as she poured the caterpillars into the bowl. With nothing else going on, Naruto decided to go over and talk to Sabella, who seemed to have been avoiding him anyway. Say, Sabella, can you clue me on all those who might be coming? For a brief moment Sabella decided to let go of her dread. She was sure since Naruto wasn't a conventional human, then her father wouldn't attempt to kill the blonde, at least not right away, hopefully. Holding up a black and white photo of two bats, Sabella exclaimed with a hint of excitement. My parents, Dracula and Belladonna, and they'll be here before sundown. I'm sure they'll absolutely love you. Yeah. Naruto responded as she sent a pointed glance out the window and noticed the sun was setting. Something told him he should go and find that scroll where he sealed the war mech just to be on the safe side. I'll be right back, he said as he sped out of the kitchen. Ah, there you are, coach. She began as she held up a portrait of Frankenstein's monster. You gotta meet Frankenstein Sr. She said as shortly after Tenise and Winnie also showed up, holding up portraits of their families. And my mummy daddy. Tenise added, quickly followed by. The Wolfman too, I'm sure we would all have a spanking great time. For a brief moment Naruto was surprised Winnie didn't go for the obvious wolf pun when he realized he was hunting for Kurama to feed them to the monsters so he could escape. Don't forget the phantom. Fantasma said as she rolled open a picture of a violet skin and pale figure that was the very definition of lanky, wearing a thick brown trench coat and hat during what looked like was quite a story night in the picture. Later that night the storm that was setting in had become more ferocious. The rain intensified as the light drizzle evolved into a fierce downpour that was turning the dirt roads into muddy death traps for vehicles that lacked off-road ties, with lightning and thunder intensifying. Outside of the mansion, a large dark silhouette approached the school. The silhouette let out a roar. The creeper's Venus spytrap, trying to keep water off itself, watched the silhouette march stiffly up the steps. Here they come, Revolta. The witch's spy communicated with her. Upon closer inspection the figures was far taller than even the average basketball player, easily estimated to be 12 or 13 feet in height, with green tattered jacket with a yellow undershirt and torn pants. His face was an unearthly pale bone white and he had sharp dirty square block hair. Behind him were two figures under a rather large umbrella. The first was a muscular and hairy beast, obviously the Wolfman, wearing a pair of tattered jeans to cover his shame. By his side was an attractive woman with flame red-orange hair who hardly looked a day over 20, wearing an ocean blue t-shirt and black trousers which fit her accordingly, but one wouldn't describe them as form-fitting. Following that, rising out of the moat was an amphibious creature with scaly green skin, webbed hands with sharp claws on the tip of each finger with menacing yellow eyes. It was none other than the creature of the Black Lagoon Gill Man. Two bats flew overhead and dropped down to the image, taking human form. The male into a purple-skinned vampire in a black tuxedo and cape, with the female wearing a dark blue dress with a slit going up to her left ankle. And with that Dracula and his wife Belladonna entered the scene. The mightiest monsters in the world. The creeper's voice whispered to himself in awe. Slowly walking through the heavy storm was the mummy man, otherwise known as the priest Imhotep. Dracula walked up next to him and held his cape over the head of his old friend. Let me cape you out of the rain, Imhotep. Dracula said. Thank you, Count. The mummy thanked gratefully. This wrap isn't waterproof. Ah, they were the mightiest of all monsters. Revolta announced as disgust soon filled her voice, watching it all from her lair. Their inactivity has made them soft, rusty. But once I take control of their progeny, all will know my name and fear me. As she said this, she brought her hands out in a dramatic fashion, bringing them close to a bat, which reached out to bite the hand, only to have Revolta retract it before it got bitten, prompting Revolta to hit the bat and send it spinning on its own perch. One by one the adult creatures began showing up. Dad. Elsa called, turning to the door and getting up to go to it. After that, a howl was heard, causing Winnie's ears to perk up at it. My papa's calling me. Winnie, she said as got up and dashed off to greet him. Now where's my sacrifice? Naruto grumbled as he realized that Kurama was nowhere to be seen at all. It only took Naruto the logical conclusion that he would be in someone's panty drawer. Though, before he could test that conclusion, Fanty popped up out of the floor. I wish you wouldn't do that. Hey there, Suga, I'd like you to meet someone. She said and then took to the air. "Father, meet my new teacher." A purple phantom in a brown trench coat and black fedora descended from the roof. Looking down at Naruto, he offered him his hand, not wanting to appear rude to her daughter's teacher. "Auntie's told me so much about you," he said as Naruto shook the phantom's hand while praying he wasn't a mind reader. "Only the good things, I hope," he awkwardly remarked as he quickly changed the subject. "It's kind of stuffy, I think I'll open the window," he said as he zipped out of the room with golden flash speed. "See, father," Fanty said. "He's quite the energetic fellow." Naruto cracked the windows to a third way open, unaware of the flying creatures that were outside. He stepped back and 3 bats had flown in, startling him. "This is the one my daughter marked," the Count Bat thought before turning back into his true form. "It's so nice to see new blood in Grimwood," the Count commented as he sized Naruto and up and down. "Ugh, did she have to choose someone with such an obnoxious hair color? And is that fox eye smell?" he wondered as his eye began to twitch. "It's marvelous to meet you, darling. I am Countess Belladonna. Our Sabella has told us all about you," the pale-skinned vampiress greeted the blonde. "Hey Naruto, where the hell is my..." As the Kurama turned the corner, he paused mid-rant as he locked eyes with Dracula. "You?" they both shouted and pointed an accusatory finger at each other. Kurama, being the first to react, launched a tomato he had wrapped in his tails at the Count, which he was saving for Naruto. The Count ducked under the tomato and bared his fangs. "Prepare to be skinned, fox. I should go and meet the other parents," he decided as he made his way out of there. "He's a bit odd, but he's a fantastic teacher, mommy." "I'm sure he is, darling," Belladonna said as she placed her hand on her daughter's forehead. "But you know how your father feels about mortals, and I can't guarantee that he'll spare the man," she regretfully told her daughter, who adorned a downcast look. Naruto slid down the stair banister and made it to the front door. So much for using Kurama as a peace offering, but maybe if he made a good impression he wouldn't worry too much. I mean, he is their daughter's teacher after all, so surely they wouldn't attempt to harm their progeny's reputation. Suddenly the door burst and a powerful gust of cold wind caused him to jump back slightly and shiver. "There he is, Dad," Elsa announced as she and her father came in. "Come to Frankentine," Frankentine Sr. said. The mummy then walked through the door after him. "Yes," he said, reaching out and letting his wrapping shoot towards the blonde. "Let's get a closer look at him." The mummy's bandages launched at Naruto, who was so stupefied due to the fact he was having the damn flashback with the mummy and the lobster he was unable to dodge the wrap that ensnared him. The mummy pulled him in until they were face to face. "Wait. Before you hurt the boy," Kurama shouted as he fell through a hole in the fucking ceiling. "Holy shit. Kurama is coming to help me. I take back half the terrible shit I said or thought about it. Can I get some popcorn first? Maybe some soda?" "You got to hell, Kurama. You got to hell and you die." "Hurt him?" the mummy asked, as if it were a joke. "I want to hug him," he said gratefully, wrapping his arms tightly around Naruto. "For making my daughter feel like a winner." As he said that, Tenise came in, holding the soccer trophy. Naruto looked down at her, realizing what he was talking about. He then looked back at him, smiling. "Of course, yeah, sure, why not?" he finally settled on as he continued mentally forming ways to bodily harm Kurama. "I'll admit I was skeptical at first, but you kid have managed to become a hero in all our girls' eyes," the Wolfman said as Winnie walked in on this. "So let's give him 3 cheers." With that, he and Winnie let out 3 howls. After that, all the monsters began cheering them. "Wow, they are far tamer than I was expecting," Naruto noted as he began to relax. "Now that everyone's acquainted, let's head to the other room for refreshments," Miss Grimwood replied. The centerpiece on the table was a large jack-o'-lantern-shaped bowl full of black liquid with white and yellow chunks floating in it. "Have some Halloween punch, everybody," she replied. Naruto and Kurama shrugged and decided to give it a try when, as such, the disembodied hand poured them some Halloween punch, which the octopus then handed them. "That's the spirit, boys," she said. The fox boys then took a swig of the punch, swishing it around in their mouths before they swallowed it. "Tangy," Naruto remarked. "It's an old Grimwood recipe," Miss Grimwood replied, raising her hand, opening it to them. "Poison ivy punch." At that, Naruto hung his head. "Made from scratch," she added. "Right," Naruto inched away from the drink but bumped into Winnie. "Hey Winnie, what do you have right there?" "Something for my papa, coach," Winnie explained, placing the item on a nearby table and opening it up, revealing the inside to be lined with several sharp needles. "Miss Kurono helped me make it." She picked up a nearby lime and placed it on the needles. She then slammed the item shut, leaving her thumb clamped onto the top of its head, where a hole was located. She lifted the item up, pointing the head to a nearby empty glass, and took her thumb off the top, causing green juice to squirt out the top and into the glass. "She told me I seem to have a gift for tinkering with things, and I made this. It's a juicer," Winnie proudly announced as Naruto looked it over. "Oh, that's interesting," he replied. Winnie's father then came over as Winnie picked up the glass. "Now you can have bitter lemonade whenever you want, Papa," Winnie replied, handing him the glass. He placed an arm around his daughter and took a swig of the green lemonade, causing his face to contract into itself from the sourness. His face then returned to normal and he looked back at Winnie. "That's wonderful, Winnie," he said before drinking the rest of it. "Ah, nice and sour. It makes my whiskers pucker." Meanwhile, Sabella was handing her parents matching red bath robes with white edges, along with a white and black belt. "Father, Mother, this is my gift to you." "Wonderful," Dracula said. "Just what I need after a rainy flight, let me try it on." He then wrapped himself up in his cape, turning into a bat. Sabella then went over to him in his bat self and put the robe on him. "Oh, it fits, how absolutely wonderful. Such a thoughtful gift, Sabella," Belladonna said as she kissed her daughter on the forehead. "Ah," Dracula screeched in agreement. "See for yourself," Sabella said, holding up a mirror, allowing Dracula to see the robe fitting what would be his reflection. "Why?" he squawked. "That's wonderful." Matches, however, was feeling left out and shed a tear. Sabella then walked up to him, holding another red and wouldn't feel left out, Matches. She said. "I made a robe for you too, and it's fireproof." Matches smiled happily when he saw this, his smile then turning sinister. He took in a deep breath, turned red, and breathed fire on the robe. And as Sabella said, it was not affected. Elsa then walked by carrying what looked like a red Walkman, with the headphones that normally go around the ears around her neck bolts. "I made my present in science class," Elsa said. "It's a portable Shockman." She walked over to an open window and stuck the Shockman outside. Lightning then promptly struck the Shockman, causing Elsa to become engulfed in lightning. With a rechargeable battery pack that lasts for weeks. She then took off the Shockman once the lightning had stopped, handing it to Frankenstein Sr. "For you, Dad," she said. Frankenstein Sr. took the headphones and put them on his neck bolts. Then another lightning bolt promptly came and struck the Shockman, sending several thousand volts of electricity through Frankenstein Sr. "This puts volts in my bolts," he said, feeling the electricity in his neck. Once the lightning stopped, he patted Elsa on the head. "Thank you, Elsa," he said. "You're welcome, Dad," she replied. "I thought you'd get a charge out of it." Next, Tenise was presenting her present to her father, which looked like a small mummy knelt down to pick up Tenise's gift. "It's a bright light," Tenise explained as her father opened the sarcophagus, showing a mummy inside with glowing red eyes. "To brighten the darkest mummy case." "What a thoughtful gift, Tenise," the mummy then said, and finally Fantasma presented her gift for her father, which wasn't a conventional gift, but a composition. Fantasma sat at a large pipe organ, turning around to look at the crowd. "Ah ha 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 ha," Fantasma cackled. "It's called Duet for Three Hands." She then turned back to the pipe organ and the disembodied hand joined her. They began to play a rather Halloween-esque song. The octopus then joined them on a set of drums with a skull on the large drum in the middle. And 6 tentacles. "Wah ha 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 ha," she finished. She then began to play her song. Meanwhile, outside, the Venus Spytrap was listening in on the song, rocking back and forth to the beat. Back at Revolta's lair, Revolta and the Creeper were listening to everything. "Sounds like they're having fun, Revolta," the Creeper then commented. "Yes," Revolta said. "But soon the party will be over." As she said that, Fantasma had finished her song. She then turned around to a cheering audience. "Fantastic, Fantasma," the Phantom then said. "Bravo," Miss Grimwood said. "It made my blood run cold," Dracula commented. "Now that's a performance," Naruto congratulated as he clapped. Fantasma shook hands with a disembodied hand and they took a bow. "Thank you, oh thank you, aha, aha, aha ha ha," she laughed. At that moment, the grandfather clock in the room started to chime. The time read 4:30. "It will soon be dawn," Dracula said, pointing to the clock. He then turned to Sabella. "Your mother and I must be on our way, Sabella, but I will be returning tomorrow night to speak with that coach of yours." Naruto's ears twitched slightly at that. That feeling of oh shit was returning. "I know, Daddy," Sabella said in an understanding tone. Winnie and her father were also taking notice of the time, looking out the window at the moon disappearing under the horizon. "The moon is going down, Winnie," he said, and then looked down at his daughter. "I'd better run too," he said, and took notice of Naruto was at the door to bid them all farewell. "Glad you could drop by," Naruto said, waving to the monsters. "And that you decided not to kill me. In the meantime, I want you to take good care of my little Sabella," Dracula said, looking the blonde into the eyes. "Don't worry, no harm will come to her. I stake my life on it." "Good," Dracula said. Because if anything happens to her, I will drain you dry, hack up your body, and sell it to the nearest cannibals I can find. I will be seeing you tomorrow, human, as we have things to discuss." With that, Dracula and Belladonna was off. Naruto though wasn't able to relax as the Wolfman had some choice words for him. "That goes for Winnie too. We too have things to discuss another night, human," he said as he showed off his claws. Shortly afterwards, Frankenstein Sr. came up and lifted him off the ground so they were his eye level by their necks. "Elsa is my pride and joy," he said, then moving his eyes closer to theirs. "Don't let me down. You know I've been trying to be nice, but I'm not going to be manhandled by you." Naruto's rants and his steadily growing annoyed disposition were halted by the appearance of the Phantom. Naruto always were nervous around specters. The mummy then walked up to him and did what Frankenstein Sr. did as well, grabbing him by his neck and lifting him up to eye level. "Take care of Tenise and her friends," he said. His eyes then started glowing red. "Or you're going to meet a very mad mummy," he finished, dropping Naruto back to his feet as well. "You know what, legendary monsters or not, if these assholes keep manhandling me, I'll show them what a sage can do." His thought was interrupted by the Phantom creeping through a knothole in the floor and looking at him. "Not to mention a foul-tempered Phantom," he said. With that, he spun out of the hole and soared off out the door, leaving a disheveled and annoyed Naruto behind. Just roll with it. Just concerned fathers looking after their daughters. Ooh, I need a drink. Why the hell did I go with a teaching job of all things? Of all the things Naruto could list that he would consider the shyest moments in his life, being interrogated by one of your female students, protective father who was Muther Fukin the Dracula, definitely went in his top 15 of life moments that sucked. It still ranked lower than any moment of having to deal with Sasuke claiming vengeance on something. It really sucked that therapists didn't exist back then. What kind of person couldn't function unless they were trying to kill something? So tell me, what exactly are you? Dracula gave Naruto a calculative glance, obviously watching for any telltale signs of lying. At first thought he was rather dismayed at the thought of a human of all things teaching his daughter, though upon further inspection, he realized that Naruto couldn't have been human. Even a human at peak ability wouldn't be able to handle most vampires, let alone one that was in a frenzy, and especially his progeny of all creatures. Even a human that was a peak athlete would have been killed in seconds. I am human in a sense, or I was born human before I was essentially made a demon vessel. I am a vessel of a being made from a source of energy birthed from primordial essence, but even before that my ancestors inherited this source of energy, which has led to a mutation through my family lines throughout the generations. Well, genetically I would be diagnosed as a human. What I actually am is a mutated being housing a fragment of a primordial god," Naruto explained. Dracula held his Stonewall expression very well not to let any shock or apprehension flow through. A mutated being that housed a demon. More than a half-breed, but not a pure blood monster either. Then again, it wouldn't be the first time one of his progeny chose from outside the species. At least unlike Mavis, his daughter's first choice had some measure of fighting talent. "Well, Uzumaki, I take it I am correct in assuming you know little about the situation you are in concerning my daughter?" he asked, as Naruto's only response was a mere nod that betrayed little of his thoughts or concerns. "Quite simply, I'm not too happy about the situation. I expected my daughter to bond with a powerful and cultured vampire worthy of being my successor. Regardless of how long the other boy had been in the family line, he didn't have a commanding presence. He was just too damn nice. He had no intimidation factor to him. Normally in such a situation the lord or lady of the family line would have saved themselves the trouble and have one such as yourself would have been executed," he casually remarked as Naruto's expression hardened, but he did not react in any other faction. "Though saving young Winifred has earned you the favor and protection of the Ulfang the Wolfman," he continued as Naruto showed some signs of reaction by relaxing. "I am sure my daughter will get over her silly infatuation with you given some time, and I advise you not to encourage it. After all, surely a man of valor wouldn't manipulate and crush the heart of a teenager and wouldn't want to deal with the blowback from the news of such an incident." "Of course not," Naruto replied, trying to remain impassive. Dracula was making it clear that while he couldn't physically bring harm to the blonde lest he encouraged the wrath of the Lycans, he was not above ruining Naruto's reputation. It was a bit of a dirty move, but what father wouldn't resort to any means to protect their children? "I have in no way encouraged such interests in any of my students." "I am pleased to hear that. Just know that I will be keeping my eyes and ears out for such news." And with that, Dracula transformed into a vampire bat and flew out of Naruto's window. The blonde clasping his face. That went by quicker than expected, he thought, as the meeting with the Wolfman followed quickly after. At least he was thankful and didn't threaten the blonde. He was a little less inquiring than Dracula, but he did seem to be holding back something. All he would say is look after his daughter, and whatever that meant the blonde had yet to figure out. "Naruto, I'm hungry, damn it. Naruto was snapped out of his thoughts due to Kurama jabbing him in the shin with a sharpened wooden stake. Go away, Kurama. Can't you see I'm trying to lament? Lament later. It's time for dinner and I burned too much energy chasing squirrels to transform. Naruto blinked owlishly. How the fuck could you of all people burn energy chasing squirrels? They were demonic squirrels. He replied as Naruto sighed but nodded. Fine. Back in Revolta's lair, the woman was now ready to put her plan into action with a little help with the creatures around her. There's no time to waste, Grim Creeper. Get cranking. She ordered to the swamp squid as they entered the largest room in her castle. Yes, Revolta. Her humble servant then started to crank a large gear. Unlike Grimwood's crank which opened a drawbridge, this one opened a large skylight on the roof. When she saw that the new doorway was fully opened, she walked over to the spider bat that she had just empowered not too long ago. This is your target, she said as she summoned an image of Naruto in one of her spare cauldrons. Now heed these words and heed them well. Find those fools and weave them well. Fly, spider bat, fly. Soon that teacher will be learning from me, she said while he roosted, and after it flew away knowing its mission. Meanwhile, Naruto was entering the kitchen when he bumped into the angel Alia. Out of everywhere, she was the most he knew the least about. Hello Alia-san, how are you? He greeted as she turned and handed him a cup of brown liquid to which he looked with an uncertain face. Relax, it's coffee, she assured him. I thought you could use a pick-me-up. Thank you. This whole situation, this was not what I was expecting at all. I decided to become a teacher because I wanted to get away from excitement like this for a while. He took a sip of the coffee. Kiba, one of my old colleagues, stated that no matter where I went trouble followed. Turns out he was right. That merely means you are a magnet for interesting occurrences. She pointed it out with a kind smile. Like for instance, seems some of our girls have crushes on you. Naruto turned red, he began sputtering and trying to say something as the angel merely giggled. I didn't mean to unnerve you so. It was just an observation. Some men would take advantage of that, but you haven't, you're a decent man. Like a past colleague of mine in another institute I used to work at. He was a lot like you, but he resigned in order to protect the integrity of one of his more zealous students. The world needs more outstanding men like you and him. What was his name? Ashikura, Hana Ashikura. She answered. Either way, I'm sure the girls' crushes will fade. Right now they're in that complicated stage where infatuation and lust outweighs critical thinking. You're right, he nodded, there was no sense stressing about it. The best thing to do would to deflect the girls toward something else. Have their interest absorbed into something while gently letting down those who did have crushes on him. Don't encourage. What did the Count think he was doing? Telling her to come sink those succulent fangs into his man flesh or something? To assuage his paranoia, Naruto looked into the whole age of consent for the monster species. Apparently once a monster species hit their equivalent human of puberty, they were considered adults as far as monster kind was concerned, seeing as some species of monster could be ageless with an extremely low birth rate or could live for hundreds of years, so there was no reason to restrict themselves. The human laws. There were two reasons why monsters would hold to the equivalent adult age of human society, whether it be 18 or 21 for the region, or even in some places as young as 14. The first was for appearance sakes, in other words in areas that had human traffic. The other was out of tradition for the more archaic reason of arranged families and united bloodlines and alliances and such thing. As fate would have it, who other than Sabella would be sitting outside at the porch. Her expression was rather distant. Despite the trouble of the past few days, she was still one of his students. Are you okay, Sabella? What is you so down? He asked as he took a seat next to her. Oh hi coach, it's nothing. She answered, but her tone indicated otherwise. Sorry, but I don't believe you. You might feel better if you talk about it, he suggested. You must hate me. She grumbled weakly. Now why would you think that? He asked, surprised by her admission. Because I've been giving you nothing but trouble. First attacking you and then having to meet with my father, who without a doubt most likely threatened you. Sabella loved her father dearly and have seen close hand the fierceness he would unleash upon his enemies. I don't hate you or blame you for what happened, he said, placing his hand on her shoulder. Sabella was surprised at the gesture, and if it wasn't for the fact she was a vampire, she would most likely be trying off the urge to blush. You're my student and I care about what happens to you. So cheer up, okay? Thanks coach. A smile found its way to her body. I was wondering, since today is a free day, can we hang out? Sabella asked. Well, he didn't see much in harm of doing so. He wanted to show her that he was someone dependable. In that case I shall go ahead and go get ready, she said, shape-shifting into her bat form and fast-traveling back to her room. Naruto couldn't help but twitch slightly. He still had to get used to that. Whatcha getting all dressed up for Bella? Fanty asked, indicating Sabella's thigh-high jean skirt, black Mary Janes, and emerald green diamond-shaped top that exposed plenty of her shoulders. Oh, nowhere special. The coach and I are just spending the day together is all. She replied as if it was no big deal, while straining to keep a smug smile off her face. What? The other girls all gasped. Winnie let loose a low growl. Damn it. She keeps making gains, and I still haven't even gotten him to look in my direction. This calls for something drastic. Well, I should not keep him waiting. Later, girls. She strode out of the room with a flick of her hair. Ooh, she's going to steal him for herself. Totally not fair. The Phantom pouted as she shifted through the bed. Elsa merely shook her head. Patience would be the key after all. It's a secret. That was the only thing he would get out of the vampire every time he would ask where they were going. After what seemed like 5 minutes of travel, they finally arrived to a clearing. She pulled him over to a log and made motions to indicate she wanted to sit down. Come on, coach, it's not like I'm going to bite. Sabella's fangs, of course, were jutting out as she made that remark. Really? It has happened before. How do I know this isn't some ploy to get me to drop my guard? He joked. I promise I'll only bite if you want me to. The breathy tone and the lidding of her eyelids was enough to make Naruto's skin tremor a bit. Sabella. Just a little vampire humor is all, coach. He wasn't so sure of that, but he didn't want to start an argument with her. Right now was supposed to be a fun time. Coach, I'm curious about something. Have you always been a teacher? Naruto shook his head in response. I did some bodyguard work for a while. Pay was decent, but I'm a person that likes to help people. Just helping one person is boring on just the basis of a possibility instead of a definitely. The two of them talked for a fair while, with Naruto opening up and telling a few stories prior to his arrival to the area. The more they relaxed, the more Sabella found herself drawn to the man. Much time had spent, and with neither having semblance of a plan, it soon became the evening. Upon finally noticing this, Naruto insisted they began making their way back home. We should get back, Sabella, before it gets too dark. Sabella let out a restrained sigh. Very well. She got up and did a few steps before stretching. Part of her stretching including bending over at the waist and sticking her ass out. Naruto had to compose himself and tear his eyes away from that ass. Stop perving on her, scumbag. As she was standing back up, Sabella made a quick glance to the side to notice Naruto shift his eyes away. A grin made its face to her face, but she kept turn as to not reveal it to the blonde. As she sauntered on ahead, she added sway to her hips in hope of further enticing the blonde. At least I know he finds me attractive, she thought with a swell of pride. Though if I wish to win him over, I need to find a way to set up more outings like this, especially before Winnie can get her claws into him. She had the lead for now, and she needed to make sure it stayed that way. Finally, after a half an hour, thanks to Sabella moving painfully slow, they had returned back to the school. I had a fantastic time, coach. Thanks for spending time with me. Anytime, Sabella. I'll be seeing you later. He had quickly taken off before she had much of a time to form a response. He quickly arrived back to his room with the intent of a nice and long cold shower. Hey there, coach. He was nearly startled out of his skin by the voice. Sitting on his desk was none other than Fantasma in a low-cut top and pair of brown leather shorts and her trademark hat. Sorry to bother you, but I think I'm getting some of these stretches wrong, and I believe I might need some hands-on instruction in order to figure out how to do them right. Naruto briefly wondered, would he be the first man to die due to all his blood that should be pumping in his heart constantly flowing to another part of his body? Naruto found himself being dragged by Fantasma to one of the sporting areas. Fantasma, could you slow down, we still have plenty of time. Sorry, coach, she replied with a smile, I just want to get the most time out of the day that we can get. Alright, like what in particular then? He asked her. Well, even though we won the game, I would like to make that consistent. So maybe some really cool moves for volleyball or something. Arriving at the volleyball court, Fantasma floated over and got the volleyball. As a spectral entity, it took a good deal of concentration to be able to grab physical objects. Alright, first, now get into position. But that Fantasma got on the course and bent her knees while facing the net. Like this. You just need to bend your knees a bit, he suggested. Okay, she responded as she shifted. Naruto couldn't help but briefly noticed how tightly the leather clung to her backside. He sighed and diverted his gaze a bit. This was starting to become a problem that he needed to solve. He was going to simply have to accept that he needed to find an outlet and solve his pent-up sexual energies. Though to her ghostly state, Fantasma could bend and twist her bodies in inhuman ways. Craning her head in a way that would be physically possible, she caught notice of the blonde's reaction. She let a grin form on her face as she turned back and served. Way to go, Fan. Sabella and Winnie can be blunt all they want, but a little tease here, a little charm there, and a little understanding can go a long way in winning a man's heart. Well, that and a good home-cooked meal. She turned to face Naruto slightly floating off the ground. How was that, coach? That was a pretty decent serve. You'll need to add more power though, he said as Fantasma nodded. He took notice of her furrowed expression. Do you have trouble regulating your strength? Well, for phantoms we have an easier time interacting with objects physically if we're talented that way. Talent? Well, it depends in what way you're talented with your ectoplasmic energies. Some spirits focus on possessing people, while others just use pure telekinetic antics to haunt and terrorize people. It just takes more ectoplasmic energy for us to put force into things due to lacking a physical body, which we have to manifest and add even more power to maintain while interacting with objects. For our mental abilities is far easier because we're focusing on our energies on just interacting and moving objects. So I take it you're more of a mental type? He asked as she nodded. Well, I'm a highly skilled telekinetic, she pointed out, trying not to come off as too braggy, so I focused more on that than my physical interactions. I've never had much of a reason to. She then turned her attention back to the net. Could you show me how you would serve, coach? Alright, now watch closely, Naruto instructed her, focusing on her as she mimicked his movements. He had to say she was a fast learner. Out of all the girls she had the most similar body type to a human one, so it was easier for her to mimic the little nuances than the others. That was excellent, Fanty. Fanty grinned at hearing that and couldn't help but float around for joy, letting out a high-pitched squeal. The girl was better excitable and a joy to be around. From what he observed of the girl, he had a feeling they were going to get along quite well. He could see a bit of mischievousness in her to see they were alike in that regard. Okay, well, since you dragged me out here we can work on your ability to focus on your physical abilities. Her eyes lit up and she dropped down in front of him. Alright, coach, what do I do? Well, concentration is an important part of remaining solid, right? He asked her as the phantom gave a nod. Well, I want you to try and stay physical while I try to distract you. Okay, the very faint blue of the phantom became a more livelier shade of blue, and she was no longer see-through. Naruto first poked her in the stomach, causing her mouth to twitch, but she managed to remain solid. Okay, that's good. He then placed his hands on her shoulders, and she still remained solid. Come on, coach, you got to do something way more distracting than placing your hand on my shoulder, she remarked with a grin. The undertone of her comment was a bit flirty. Oh? Is that so? He thought as he took up her challenge. Naruto began walking around her, looking her up and down. He kept this up for several minutes as he wanted to get the phantom on edge. Finally he glided his hand across her back, caused the phantom to briefly go red again, let out a sharp inhale. He then brushed his fingers through her hair and had to suppress his desire to laugh when a faint blush appeared on the phantom's face. He then brought his face dangerously close to Fantasma's as their noses nearly touched. You know, you're doing quite alright. That smugness didn't last long as Fanty did something, the last thing the blonde expected. She planted a kiss right on his cheek, causing his eyes to flicker and for him to jolt back. Fantasma proceeded to double over in laughter as she lost physical form. She let out a fit of high-pitched giggles and snorts. It was goofy, no, maybe adorable was a better way to describe it, as she began grinning madly at the coach. Never try to get one over on the trickster, coach. Alright, I'll give you this, but I promise you, Fanty, I will get you back. Next thing he knew, the phantom landed and climbed on his back. Nuo, I'll be good, I promise. Alright, let's continue, he remarked as he made a hand gesture for her to get off so they could continue. You can't beat me, coach. Just admit that one and I'm the greatest. At this point she was letting her progress so far get to her head. Well, in that case. It was time to call upon his shinobi knowledge. Channeling his chakra, Biddy then ran his finger along her ear. Completely unprepared for the stimulation, Fantasma let out a loud moan and lost control of her physical form. Naruto nearly fell over when she suddenly went intangible. It appears you're not so invincible after all. Wow, coach. Being able to do things like that must make you quite popular with the ladies. I don't know if I feel safe around you, she remarked as she hugged herself. Alright, Fantasma, he dryly remarked. Consider us even. Fantasma. Not Fanty. You're mad. Fanty pouted as she floated over to him. Don't be mad at me, coach. Come on, it was all in good fun. She opened her arms and gave him a pleading look. Fine, he stepped forward and was nearly tackled as she brought him into a bear hug. You girls are going to get me fired, he grumbled. Why do you say that, coach? Her expression turned sly. You plan on doing naughty things to us, she said with her southern drawl not helping his attempt to stay platonic. You are definitely going to get me fired, he told her in particular. Come on, it's time to head back, he said as he began heading back up the trail. Come on, coach, you're still thinking of human rules. Such things aren't as frowned upon if the potential pairing meets the family's expectations. Like for instance, you have so much vitality. she remarked with a content sigh as he could feel her interact with his life force as she brushed her hand against him. He would have been alarmed if not for the fact he knew the girl was playful and joyful. Do you know how many phantom girls would kill to be in my position for a chance at you? I wasn't aware I would be the catch for phantoms. He said as Fantasma began bobbing her head and humming as she skipped ahead of him. Well, whenever a person with great life force dies and has enough ties with the supernatural, they have the potential to become a phantom. That amount of life force in life can be used to either form their own ghostly domain or expand the domain of the family they are in. Not all phantom or spirits have the power to have their own domain, so they find themselves having to haunt locals or take residence in another phantom's locale. Only few phantoms like my father can still draw life energy from an outside force to expand our family's domain. So in essence, the greater the size of your domain, the higher your status is. They wouldn't go as far as murder, would they? Upon seeing her wince, he got his answer. Some phantoms are like that, sure, but not all of us. She insisted with an expression that was pretty telling that she did not want him to think that she had the potential to be like that. Yeah, you would have too much fun pranking me and teasing me to contemplate murder, he remarked. She struck a pose and playfully slapped her ass and winked at him. You know it. Naruto shook his head as the two of them continued their journey back to the school. When Fantasma arrived back to her room, she had not expected for the amalgam monster to be waiting in her room. You were with Coach, right? How was it? Out of all the girls, Fantasma and Elsa were hands down the closest. Fantasma was the one that liked to have fun, and Elsa was the intelligent tinkerer, so they balanced each other's traits. While the phantom was extremely outgoing, Elsa was more introverted and preferred a good book. The mind of her amalgam body was that of an extremely shy girl who spent much of her adolescence being bullied. So Elsa had difficulty interacting with others at times. After all, unlike most species, the way amalgam monsters were created were from cannibalized parts, including DNA donations from the parents, and with the aid of a necromancer and flesh weaver. Absolutely amazing. She began to floating in the air. With that, she began recounting of the events that happened to her friend. It was a quiet day at the Grimwood School for Ghouls. Elsa had just finished charging herself up and dressing for the day. She picked out one of her better dresses. A semi-sheer dress with shoulder straps with a modified halter neckline atop a fitted bodice with princess seams, with the bottom of the design of a flirty skater skirt flaring below a banded waist. Along with a pair of lace-up boots. Typically they would have been better with a more patterned outfit, but these boots shorten and thicken her legs with was a good match for her tall height. She began thinking back to the discussion she had with Kurama. Mr. Kurama, can I ask you a few questions about Coach Naruto? The kitsune looked up from the phone he was using. Normally he would have been annoyed being interrupted from doing anything, but he welcomed the distraction from the infuriating advice where the buttons were too small from his paws. Elsa rubbed the back of her head. Anyways, you know Mr. Uzumaki well, right? Known him all his life. Pain in the ass. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions, then? Yeah, sure, fine. He said as he hopped up on the counter, crossed his legs and rested his head on his front legs. I'm just going to be frank with you. What kind of girl does he prefer? Does he have a type? What, like physical? Emotional? Mental? He needed her to be more thorough than that. Okay, let's start with physical. Kurama gave it a thought. Never seen him looked at a girl with an apple body type, so that's out. For the longest time he was attracted to this girl with a pear body type, but when it came down to it, his last longest relationship was a girl with a Hercules figure, but when it comes down to it, he cares more about the emotional aspect if you're thinking about an actual relationship. I take it you're asking that because as an amalgam you can get parts and alter your body? He asked as she nodded. I'd recommend you hold off on that. You want to pursue him, that's your business, but you're better off forming a friendship and genuine emotional connection. Elsa nodded in understanding. Thanks, Mr. Kurama. She reached into the cabinet and brought down a box of chocolates she kept hidden. For you. She placed on the table, neglecting to mention to the kitsune that these chocolates were quite stale. I can do this. Elsa and Fantasma had been a good deal of time talking about the Phantom's outing with their coach. Her friend encouraged her to give pursuing their coach a try. Well, here I go. She thought to herself as she walked up and gave herself a look in the mirror. Instead of having breakfast, Naruto was doing some early morning stretches to get ready for the day. Well, look who finally decided to show himself. Naruto said as Kurama came strolling up. Morning to you too. I see you managed to avoid getting fired. Anyway, why are you even out here? It's not like for you these stretches are doing anything. I'm just trying to keep my mind sharp and focus clear. Naruto replied, avoiding the question. Ah, the sea of clunge is proving too much for you. God damn it, Naruto silently uttered. Stupid ass connection. He had hoped Kurama wouldn't have picked up on the real reason, but that wasn't going to happen. Are you even going to do something about it, or are you going to let your desires build up and lose control? The kitsune really didn't want Naruto to go back to making stupid decisions like in his youth. No Kurama, I'm actually making steps to remedy that. I'm actually going out tonight with Ajetha. He answered as the kitsune gave him a look of surprise. A succubus. He had to admit until they arrived at this academy the people that Naruto regularly encountered were nowhere near as attractive as the people back at the shinobi nations. The regular people of this world simply did not compare without makeup or surgeries. One thing was sure. The succubus had a chest on par with the blonde's former wife, if not surpassing it. She's an attractive woman and has certainly made it clear what she wanted. If all she wanted was something physical, he wasn't going to complain. It had been a while after all. At least you're doing something and not bemoaning your situation like a pathetic bitch. Anyway, I am just dropping by to let you know I am heading into the nearby city in a few days, so I won't be around for a while. Figuring out what humanoid form you want to develop for this lifetime? He asked more for a confirmation than seriously wondering. It was cyclical with Kurama, who would every few decades reinvent a humanoid form to develop a life. Pretty much. Yeah, well, good luck. The blonde said as the kitsune bid farewell as well and left the area. As soon as Kurama left, the sound of heavy footsteps reached his ears. He turned just in time to see Elsa approaching him. Morning, coach. She greeted him with a bit of a stammer. Well, good morning, Elsa, how are you? He greeted the amalgam. I am doing fine, coach. So what are you up to? Well, I've decided to do some morning exercises. I have a lot of pent-up energy, so I have to burn off the excess. It's also good to stay limber and such. Oh. Can I join in? Elsa smiled, doing a gesture that brought notice to his chest. Naruto took notice of the girl's attire. Those were not exercise clothes. Are you sure? I would hate for your clothes to get dirty. It'll be fine. She replied with the faintest of blushes. I mean, I could leave if I'm distracting you. If it had been Sabella or Fantasma, he was sure it would have been a guilting tactic, but with Elsa, she seemed more of an upfront girl, so he obliged. No, it's fine, you can stay. He said as the girl proceeded to begin doing some stretches before the blonde heard her yelp and the sound of something snap. Elsa? You alright? He asked as he noticed the girl was bending to the side slightly and rather stiff. My joints locked up. I thought I could skip my morning exercises and do them later in the day, and now I'm paying for them. Naruto couldn't help but wince at that. That sounded terrible. I have to work it out. My joints will work eventually. Nah, I can't in good conscience leave you like this. Tell me how to help. He softly urged her. The amalgam was a bit hesitant but relented and instructed Naruto how to help her. Nodding and reaching for the girl's arms first, he uncrossed them and began to slowly work them despite the awkwardness of the situation. Soon, her arms were acting a bit more flexible and not stuck in one place, though she continued to move them and stretch them after they got moving just to be sure. They then moved over to the wall of the school so Elsa could lean against it for balance. Naruto meanwhile got started on the girl's left leg, using one hand to steady the girl as his other hand lifted and bent her leg rhythmically. So, is this something that happens regularly? For amalgam monsters and zombies, we need to keep regularly exercising our bodies to keep everything in working order because of degradation and all that. Naruto had to admit while her body temperature was cooler than a normal human, her skin didn't feel what he expected. The thing was, he was not put off by the scale skin and the stitching. First and foremost, a wonderful personality was important to him. After a few minutes she was finally able to move and become flexible again. With the competition with the Callaways not too far away, Naruto thought it was time to check out the area and equipment that would be used. Upon learning that the girls didn't have proper uniforms, so it was time to take them into town and get them fitting in new uniforms. Thankfully there was a seamstress that could make enchanted clothing that would be customizable for each of the girls, but it would literally take all day, so a trip first thing in the morning would be required. With the rental van he had gotten the previous evening, he was set to go. After breakfast he double-checked to make sure everyone had everything they needed for the day, helping the girls inside the van. After helping them inside he climbed into the driver's seat and closed the door, starting the engine and plotting the course on the GPS device. As he began driving down the road towards the highway, Naruto couldn't help but think about how his life took such an interesting turn. He was beginning to understand more and more why Hagoromo took to traveling and interacting with other cultures. It surely was a new experience just living a simple and humble life of peace without having to fight for his life. As he drove through the streets of Sapphire Trove he took in the sights. Though before they could stop and partake in all the shops, they would need to make their stop at the seamstress's home. They soon came to a house not too far from home. It was a two-story structure with a few trees strewn about here or there along the yard. While the grass wasn't wild, it was a bit unkempt, and there was the occasional scrap of grass which he surmised that most citizens that were passing by assumed it was abandoned. "Alright girls, we made it to our stop. Time to get out," he said as he parked the car. Going to the back, he opened the door and the girls stepped outside. Once by once they each stood out, wearing the specially enchanted bracelets to alter their appearance while they were in town. The first to step out was Tenise. Her human disguise was that of an olive-skinned young girl with long billowy raven hair and willowy frame. Behind the button noise was a pair of mischievous blue eyes filled with curiosity and wonder. Considering her ancestry hailed from Africa, it was only natural she had features like a sloped forehead and rather soft chin than compared to the others. Fantasma was next, her hair becoming a dazzling platinum blonde that was a great compliment to her pale skin. She had large and bright turquoise eyes with high cheekbones. Her ancestry hailed from the deep souths of Louisiana, where her family for generations produced such crops as rice when she was alive. Next was Elsa, towering over the girls by far, and unlike Fantasma's pale ivory or Tenise's bronze, Elsa had a shade of warm ivory with mid-back length raven hair. Her eyes were as dark and deep as emeralds, and she was by far the most beauty with a strong-looking jaw. Next was Winnie, who kept her natural hair color, but far more tamed and done in the style of a ponytail. Her eyes changed to a deep eggplant purple with almond-shaped eyes, and all traces of fur was gone, replaced with a deep dark brown colored skin. Finally came out Sabella, statuesque as ever. She was a mix between pale ivory and porcelain. She took on the features of long chocolate brown hair and matching eyes. She kept the high prominent cheekbones of her natural state. They entered through the first floor of the home. The first floor of the location was like that of a typical two-story private business home combination, where it looked like the first floor consisting of the shop, with the other rooms looking like they would lead to storerooms and other backrooms. From what he understood, the seamstress that lived here, Selkie Silks, was a highly talented seamstress that made clothing for varied monster species. Due to her talent and variety, it made her services more costly than your common seamstress, but considering how difficult it was to find a mender and enchanter of clothing for some species outside their communities, it set the circumstances for Selkie to thrive in her environment. "Lady Selkie, we have need of your services." Most would not find themselves unless by invitation or referral. The first floor of her home was her shop, consisting of the front room, a storage room, a back room, and office. From what he understood, this was a small operation, so there would be a few employees who would include an accountant and salesgirl. "Welcome, I always look forward to weaving new wares." Selkie looked to be from the same generation of Grimwood, a bit difficult to tell as her arachnid features, while not as prominent as a full-blooded spider woman, were still prominent. Pleasantries were exchanged as they were led to a place they could sit. 5 outfits for 5 different species were going to be quite the task. "Now what order of business have you come to commission? Mending? Alteration? Or perhaps a brand new commission altogether?" She curiously craned as her multiple spider limbs slowly exited out under the slits of her dark-colored blouse as they proceeded to scoop up several tape measures. Naruto pulled a thin folded letter out of his pocket and deposited into the long spindly fingers of the seamstress. "Madam Grimwood is the client. She wished to have 5 gym uniforms commissioned for her students for her academy. All the designed and specified colors are listed in the letter." She faintly noted as she used her surprisingly strong limbs to clear out multiple mannequins draped with clothing items to the side. "Who shall be first?" she inquired as one of her lower legs gently tapped against the floor. "Yes, I'm first." Winnie spared no time and hesitation to go first. The sooner they got this over with, the sooner they get to travel around town. For each species there were preferences along with materials that worked cohesively with each species. Like for instance, it would be necessary to use hairs from a phantom or specter sewn into the clothes, so when they turned intangible their clothes would turn with them. It was far more troublesome and expensive for lichens, as the type of material needed for their clothing would also need to be enchanted by magic to confirm and stretch when they changed. As a result, it was mostly undergarments and pants that went through this process, unless the client had a sizable bank account. With the girls' measurements finally taken, the group was fine to go on about their business until they would need to return for fitting and alterations if necessary. And such as promise, he took the girls out as promised. "Ah hell," Naruto murmured to himself as he saw the girls hit a Forever 21. Between that, Sears, Hot Topic, and other stores, he knew they were going to be there all night. As he saw the girls ravage through the clothes rack, he couldn't help but wince. He remembered the horror stories that Shikamaru and Chaoji used to tell him when their wives would take them shopping. Hinata, bless her soul, was never the biggest on fashion, and leave it to Sai not to be so much as bothered being dragged about from store to store all day, earning him the ire of most of the male population of their generation, as he lacked the understanding of their pain. Even he had enough sense to fake the dreaded shopping trips around the other guys. It was times like this that Naruto missed his old life and was a bit resentful of the so-called reward of keeping his memories when he was reincarnated into a new life. Then again, considering how deeply chakra was intertwined to the souls of his people and his being larger than most, he guessed it was a necessity on the side of caution, so his reborn soul wouldn't cause havoc in the new world he was born in. He was thankful towards the final years of his life that his world had another technological boom that put it on par with the technology of this world. As such, he was spending a lot of time on his phone simply watching reactions while he was waiting. So far he was enjoying Young Justice, Jujutsu Kaisen and Castlevania since his other shows ended for the season and he had to wait until next year for the new seasons. Once the crowd numbers began to thin out since it was heading into late evening, he went about the stores collecting his students. "Alright, we're going to be heading to Ralph's. Essential foods and toiletries only, alright." When they entered the stores, they were greeted by a passing employee. Ralph's was a decent place, not as massive as a super chain like Walmart, but then again, the latter store had a series of issues from low-quality goods like the meat in its deli section to the people they hire. "Holy hell, look at all the meat," Winnie uttered as she began to practically salivate. She couldn't help but take a large whiff as she took in the scents and smells of the frozen food sections. "Peel puppy before you draw attention to us," Sabella remarked. "Hey, Coach's cereal included in that?" Tenise asked as her eyes roamed over the various boxes. "Try to stick to 1 or 2 boxes that you agree among yourselves. We're only going to be down here in the area for a few days." If only the seamstress lived closer or traveled, but beggars couldn't be choosers. It was nearly a day's travel, and it wasn't ideal to have to keep ferrying the girls back and forth whenever an alteration or change needed to be made to their outfits. Now, with the girls both having some outfits for the next few days and some food, the group finally arrived to where they would be staying the next few days. A small home, a property that belonged to Miss Grimwood's family. More than large enough to fit 6 people for a few days. It hadn't been in use for a few decades. It was going to take a bit of time and elbow grease to clean up the house. Thankfully, every few years maintenance for the plumbing and other amenities was kept in case it needed to be used in case of emergency, otherwise it was relatively abandoned. Once parked, Naruto got out and popped open the doors. "Groceries first and then you can get your things." Pulling the keys out of his pocket after scooping up a bag of groceries with his left arm, Naruto made his way to the old rustic-looking building. From the decayed bits of patches, he could see the home was in need of a paint job. He was probably going to need to access if there were any holes he needed to patch up, along with any water damage or other possible issues. His musings stopped when he sensed what was known as killing intent back in his world. Vibrant bloodlust. He wasn't the only one, as Winnie did a sharp turn and a fearsome growl began to reverberate from the deep recesses of her throat. "Win." Fantasma uncharacteristically stammered at the Lycan's near instant change. "Get down," Naruto ordered as he body flickered in between his students and several arrows. Swatting away the arrows that were fired, he quickly moved them out of harm's way with a dash, scooping them up and away as the spot they were standing exploded and smoldered, leaving behind a small crater. Dropping them down away from the van and home, he gets between his students and the small collective of young adults, all bearing crosses. "In the name of Karstein Academy, we shall rid the world of you monsters," one of their attackers announced as he drew out a crossbow. "Well, so much for a normal day. Arc of time," were the only words Naruto heard before it felt like the entire world around him had changed into a swirling tide of colors before he was blasted. Thankfully, the attack had blown him back and only resulted in minimal injuries. The only thing he could perceive having this much of an effect and so suddenly was magic, and seeing his students' lives were in danger, he had no choice but to go full power and end things quickly for their safety. Unfortunately, unknown to the blonde, what felt like a minute at most was much longer, as the first spell he was hit with was a time-based spell, and the events that played out had been far more serious than he knew. "There's no way we won't be on the fast track to ranking up by killing these many monsters," the cocky tall male with dusky colored hair announced. "Such a waste. I wouldn't mind having an evening with a few of them," another squat-eye looking male said as he readied his bow. The platinum blonde in their group grimaced in disgust. "You're disgusting, Michael. Can't you think with anything but your dick? You creeps better back the fuck off if you want to leave in one piece," Winnie threatened as she did her best to reel in her instinct to fight and kill. "Leave now and we'll forget what you just did." Sabella turned slightly and saw Elsa and Tenise had rushed to their teaching, calling to him and pleading, but he was non-responsive. With a call of haste and sturdy, the group of what the monsters could only assume her hunters were surrounded by splashes of gold, orange, and silver teal auras. "Sorry babe, looks like you found trouble," the shortest of the males with shaggy brown hair remarked as he flashed toward Sabella and grabbing her from behind, moving her away from Winnie. "Slow," the staff older cast, leaving her senses and movements slowed to a serious degree. "For the founder's sake. William, we're supposed to be slaying monsters to up our prestige. You guys can worry about getting laid later. Keep up that attitude realiz and you'll never get pussy. William remarked as he used free hand to grope the ass of the time-slowed vampire. A growl ripped through the Reteed's throat. Winnie knew she could rip both of their hearts out in seconds if she wanted to, but she wasn't sure if she was fast enough to grab Sabella before the bastard feeling her up could stake her. That was when she caught sight of something slowly ascending behind them. With a mighty cry, Elsa launched a blast of ectoplasma that knocked the staff user off his feet. Taking advantage of the distraction, Winnie dashed forward. Throwing all her strength into the punch, she knocked the molester away from the vampire, pushing her out of the way as the flailer tossed a stake to which she caught with her free hand. You damn spook. The sole female member took out a bow and began firing arrows. While agile, Fantasma was not a seasoned fighter, and eventually one of the arrows nicked her side, causing her to let out a shriek of pain. Blood blossoms. The only tangible source that could harm a ghost. Normally it would take ecto energy or magic to harm a ghost, and most forms of the latter could only force a ghost into the living world or make them tangible, since targeting the core directly required a great deal of power. Leave my friends alone. Elsa hollered as she dashed forward with a mighty dash. The heavy stamps of her stomps resulted in spine-tingling tremors as she launched her fist only for fist to be blocked by the blonde using his sword. Michael. Becca. Get down. The spellcaster of their group had recovered his staff and cast a spell that launched a massive fireball. Elsa was tackled out of the way just in time by Winnie, who pulled her friend out of the way as multiple crossbolts were fired at them. One of them grazed Winnie's legs, causing her to shriek in pain as they dropped. She clutched at her leg in pain as the spot grazed was burned and her skin began to bruise a sickly purple color. Stop screwing around and finish them. Shrieked the bow user at her companions. But before they could continue their attacks, an explosion of gold lit up the area. As the energy began to solidify, the Karstian kids soon found themselves blasted back by an incredible invisible force, hurtling them towards the edge of the property. In an instant, Naruto appeared next to Winnie and Elsa. Coach. Coach Naruto. They were elated to see their coach had recovered. His hand hovered over Winnie's wound as he purged the silver-coated poison from her system, leaving behind unblemished skin. The only sign of damage having been dealt was the missing fur. Next, he checked on Fantasma, who began to recover from the effects of the blood blossom upon him destroying the arrow, and then Sabella, who began recovering from the magic. He turned to the ones who dared try to attack his students. A cold fury filled his eyes as he clenched and unclenched his hands. You know, I consider myself a patient and reasonable man. Normally I'm about the path of forgiveness, but threatening those I care about, my precious students, cross the line of my tolerance, and since you little bastards are after glory, the best suited punishment is to put an end to your careers permanently. He was going to leave them permanently crippled by taking a combination of their ability to see, speak or limbs. And to make sure the punishment stick, he was going to apply seals to them to damage their internal inner workings, so even if they were healed and restored with magic, there was no possible way they could continue as hunters. Just as Naruto was about to continue, a bolt of thunder rained down between him and the students. Appearing before him was a woman with silver hair wearing a witch's hat. Her style was gothic, a button-down jacket, a long black skirt, a green and black layered overskirt with a cape, a belt with decorative buckle. In her hand she held a 36-foot-long staff carved out of a wood he didn't recognize, and on the end was a glowing reddish-pink orb. With a single stamping motion and a cry of greater teleportation, the woman and the students were gone. Naruto cursed the fact they got away as he collapsed to one knee. His students rushed to his side as he began to recover from the effects of the magic. I'm alright girls, let's get inside, he insisted to them. With everyone inside, they did their best to set up what defenses they could in preparation of another surprise attack. It wasn't until late into the evening until everything finally calmed down. As Naruto surveyed the place, he couldn't help but notice there were many things that needed to be taken care of. Like busted hinges and pipes needing replacement. The hour and a half he spent inventorying the damage and working out what parts needed ordering and what tools he would need kept his mind off the frustration he had been feeling earlier. After making sure there was dinner prepared for his students, he bid them good night. As luck would have it, Naruto woke the next morning to find the laundry machine had broken. He had been alerted when Elsa and Tenise had been sent to his room to wake him up. He arrived to see the others haul out sodden clothes out of the drum, dump them in a basket, and set about trying to make the floor suitable to at least walk on. The blonde proceeded to push out the water by creating a weak water dragon and casting it outside. He couldn't help but notice they were in their sleepwear, and predictably, the more daring ones like Sabella and Fantasma exposed more skin than he was sure would be considered appropriate in the presence of an unrelated male, but speaking up felt like a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. I can handle most of the cleaning. Whose turn is it to cook? He asked as Elsa answered him. Well, why don't you get started on breakfast and the rest of you can set up some rope to air dry the clothes. After all, they were too reasonably soaked to dry most of the clothes. They agreed as they left the blonde alone. Naruto had slowly and methodically taken half the machine apart before he found the problem. It wouldn't take him too long to fix things. You're avoiding the issue, kid. You're broadcasting your thoughts so damn much it's starting to give me a headache. I can't help it, Kurama. I let my guard down, and my students could have been killed because of it. Look, don't ask me, I'm not an expert on this sort of thing, but maybe it's time you become more than their gym teacher and become their instructor. Well, when it came down to it, Kurama was right. He needed to take the reins and make sure what happened would never happen again. Naruto sat with the girls in the gymnasium, his arms around them as they huddled close to him. The girls were all visibly shaken from the attack, and he could feel their hearts racing as they clung to him. It's okay, Naruto whispered, his voice soothing. You're safe now. I won't let anything happen to you. Winnie leaned her head on his shoulder, her breathing ragged. I can't believe they hate us just because we're monsters, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sabella was trembling, her fangs visible as she bit her lip. I never thought I'd be so scared, she said, her voice shaking. Fantasma was clutching at his shirt, her eyes wide with fear. I thought we were going to die, she whispered. Elsa was silent, her body shaking as she tried to control her emotions. Tenise was the only one who seemed calm, but Naruto could see the worry in her eyes. Naruto held them all close, his heart breaking for their pain. He knew what it was like to be different, to be feared and rejected. It was something he had struggled with his entire life, and he didn't want these girls to have to go through it too. I know it's hard, he said softly. But you're not alone. You have each other, and you have me. I'll always be here to protect you. The girls leaned into him, their bodies relaxing slightly as he spoke. I don't want to be scared anymore, Sabella said, her voice barely above a whisper. Naruto stroked her hair gently. I know, and you don't have to be. I'm here for you. Winnie lifted her head, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Thank you, Naruto, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Fantasma nodded in agreement, her fingers twisting in his shirt. Thank you, she whispered. Elsa finally spoke up, her voice shaky but determined. We won't let them scare us, she said, her eyes flashing with conviction. We'll stand up to them. Tenise put a hand on Naruto's arm, her eyes meeting his. Thank you for protecting us, she said softly. We couldn't have done it without you. Naruto smiled at them all, feeling a warmth in his chest. These girls were strong, and he knew they would be okay. He would make sure of it. You're all welcome, he said, his voice firm. And I promise you, no one will hurt you as long as I'm around. The sun was shining brightly in the sky as Naruto, Sabella, Winnie, Fantasma, Elsa, and Tenise worked on fixing up the old mansion they were staying in. They had been staying there since the attack by the anti-monster Monster Hunter Academy students and had been busy repairing the damage that had been done. As they worked, Naruto couldn't help but notice the girls' exhaustion. They had been working hard for hours, and he could see the fatigue in their eyes. Alright girls, why don't we take a break? He suggested. The girls nodded gratefully, and they all sat down on the steps of the porch. I'm sorry, I'm still wondering how this menial work is supposed to help, Winnie wondered, wiping the sweat from her forehead. Trust me, there are ways to improve your strength, dexterity, and skills than just traditional training, Naruto replied. By the time we're done, you girls will be a force to be reckoned with. On your own and even stronger together. Fantasma smiled at Naruto. Thank you, coach. You're always so kind to us. Naruto grinned. Of course. You're my students, and I'll always be there for you. Elsa spoke up next. We've never really had anyone like you in our lives, coach. Someone who cares about us for who we are. Naruto looked at her with concern. What do you mean? Well, we're the children and successors to the immortal heads of our species, Elsa explained. It's not uncommon for usurpers to either go after our families or try to curry prestige and power by getting close to our families. But you see us as individuals. You don't judge us based on what we are or what you could gain from us. Sabella nodded in agreement. It's true. We've always felt like outsiders even among our own kind, like we don't belong anywhere. But with you, we feel like we have a place. Naruto smiled warmly at the girls. I understand and, in that case, happily accept you into my team. We're going to stick together no matter what. The girls all smiled back at Naruto, feeling a sense of comfort and belonging they had never felt before. As they went back to work, Naruto couldn't help but feel grateful for the girls in his life. They had been through so much together, but they were always there for each other, supporting one another through thick and thin. And as they worked to fix up the old mansion, Naruto knew that they were building more than just a home. They were building a family that would always be there for each other, no matter what the world threw their way. Naruto, Sabella, Winnie, Fantasma, Elsa, and Tenise were hard at work renovating the kitchen. The cabinets were old and falling apart, the countertops were scratched and stained, and the appliances were outdated. But with Naruto's help, the girls were making great progress. Naruto was using his strength to move the old cabinets out of the way, while Elsa was sanding down the countertops to get them ready for a new coat of paint. Winnie was measuring the space for the new cabinets, while Tenise and Fantasma were working on rewiring the electrical outlets. Sabella was in charge of painting the cabinets, carefully applying a fresh coat of white paint to each one. As she worked, she couldn't help but feel grateful for Naruto's help. She had never met anyone like him before, someone who was willing to risk his life to save hers and her friends out of his own will and genuine concern. "Thank you for everything, Naruto," Sabella said, pausing in her painting to look at him. "We wouldn't have made it this far without you." Naruto smiled at her. "Don't mention it, Sabella. I'm happy to help." Winnie, who had been prickly for most of the day, suddenly spoke up. "I'm sorry for how I acted earlier," she said, looking at Naruto. "It's all just so frustrating to deal with." Naruto shrugged. "It's okay, Winnie. I understand that as a proud fighter what you went through hurt your pride. Learning from that loss will only make you stronger in the end." Fantasma, who had been working silently next to Tenise, suddenly spoke up as well. "I can't believe those humans would do something like this," she said, her voice full of anger. "We didn't do anything to them." Tenise nodded in agreement. "It's not fair," she said. "We're just trying to live our lives like everyone else." Naruto listened to them with understanding. He knew what it was like to be discriminated against for being different. "I know it's not fair," he said. "But we can't let their hatred and fear control us. We have to keep moving forward and proving them wrong." The girls nodded in agreement and they went back to work, their spirits lifted by Naruto's words. As they continued to work on the kitchen, they talked and laughed, enjoying each other's company and the sense of camaraderie that had formed between them. By the end of the day, the kitchen looked completely transformed. The cabinets were gleaming with fresh paint, the countertops were smooth and shiny, and the appliances were sparkling clean. As they admired their handiwork, Naruto couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. "Great job, everyone," he said, grinning at them. "The kitchen looks amazing." The girls beamed at him, happy to have accomplished something together. As they cleaned up the tools and put them away, they knew that they had not only created a beautiful kitchen, but were laying the foundation for a strong bond that would last for years to come. Naruto and the girls had been working hard for days to renovate the old mansion they were staying in. It had been a daunting task, but they had made significant progress. Now it was time to tackle the bathroom. As they entered the bathroom, they were met with an old and worn-out bathtub, a cracked sink, and peeling wallpaper. It was clear that the bathroom needed a lot of work. Naruto looked around, taking in the state of the room. "Alright, let's get started. Winnie, can you help me remove the bathtub?" he asked. Winnie nodded eagerly and stepped forward to help Naruto. Together, they worked to remove the old bathtub from the bathroom. It was a tough job, but they eventually managed to get it out. Meanwhile, Sabella and Elsa were busy scraping the old wallpaper from the walls. It was a tedious job, but they were making progress. Fantasma floated around, helping where she could. As they worked, they chatted and laughed, enjoying each other's company. Naruto was happy to see the girls getting along so well. They had been through a lot together, and it was nice to see them working together towards a common goal. After several hours of hard work, they had made significant progress. The old wallpaper had been removed, and the walls had been sanded down in preparation for a fresh coat of paint. The old sink had been replaced with a new one, and the plumbing had been updated. Naruto stepped back to admire their handiwork. "Wow, you guys have done an amazing job," he said with a smile. The girls beamed with pride at his compliment. "Thanks, coach. We couldn't have done it without you," Sabella said, speaking for the group. As they continued to work, the girls couldn't help but feel grateful for Naruto's help and support. He had become more than just their gym instructor, he was their friend and protector. As the day drew to a close, they stood in the newly renovated bathroom, admiring their hard work. It was a far cry from the old rundown bathroom they had started with, and they couldn't be happier with the result. "Alright, let's call it a day. We've done enough for now," Naruto said with a smile. The girls nodded in agreement and they left the bathroom feeling satisfied and accomplished. Naruto and the girls had just finished renovating the bathroom and were now ready to tackle their bedrooms. As they walked into the first room, Sabella let out a sigh. "This room is so plain," she said, looking around. "It needs something to make it feel more like home." Naruto nodded in agreement. "What were you thinking?" he asked. Sabella thought for a moment. "Maybe we could paint the walls a different color," she suggested. "Something warmer, like a pale yellow." Elsa spoke up next. "And we could add some curtains to the windows," she said. "Something with a pattern to add some visual interest." Fantasma floated over to the closet. "And we could install some shelves for our clothes and other belongings," she suggested. "That way we can keep everything organized." Winnie nodded in agreement. And maybe we could add some artwork to the walls, she said. Something to make the room feel more personal. Naruto listened to their ideas and smiled. I think those are all great ideas, he said. Let's get to work. The first step was to paint the walls, and the girls eagerly helped out. Elsa had brought her own ladder, which made it easy for them to reach the higher parts of the walls. Once the paint had dried, they moved on to the curtains. Sabella had brought some fabric she had found at a local thrift store, and Elsa had a sewing machine they could use to make the curtains. As they worked, the girls chatted and laughed, their earlier fears forgotten. Naruto smiled as he watched them. They had all been through so much, but it seemed like they were finally starting to feel at home. Once the curtains were up, Fantasma helped to install the shelves in the closet, while Winnie and Elsa hung up the artwork. Naruto had found some frames at a nearby thrift store, and the girls had each picked out a favorite painting to display. As they stepped back to admire their work, Sabella let out a contented sigh. This is perfect, she said. It finally feels like home. Naruto nodded, feeling a sense of satisfaction. I'm glad you like it, he said. Now, who's ready to move on to the next room? There was still yet more to do to fix up the old place that, unknown to them much further down the line, would become their forever home. Alright, Sabella, today we're going to focus on training that caters to your unique abilities as a vampire. We'll work on enhancing your vampire skills and combining them with ninja techniques. In terms of overall combat effectiveness, Sabella had many options in not only combat, but blood magic as well. She would be one of the more balanced of the girls in that aspect. Sounds interesting, coach. What do I do first? She was glad she grabbed some practical workout pants and top during the shopping trip they worked on. While her interest in Naruto had not waned, she had to admit the desire to defend herself was taking first priority. Great. Let's start with your speed and agility. Since speed seemed to be one of the strongest traits vampires use for combat, we need to have it honed so your agility and reflex are instinctual to minimize how much time you waste thinking on defense and utilizing that time in either offense or breaking down and analyzing your enemy's abilities. I want you to try to dodge and evade my attacks using your incredible reflexes. Alright, I am ready at any time. Naruto charges at Sabella with lightning speed, throwing a series of quick punches and kicks. Sabella gracefully dodges and maneuvers, using her vampire speed to her advantage. A couple of hours had passed as Naruto instructed her and helped her fine-tune her ability to dodge by giving her lessons on how to read her opponent's body. The ability to use her vampire senses to pick up on subtly of breathing, heartbeats, and the most minute twitches of muscles was something only Sabella and Winnie would be able to do. Good job, Sabella. Your agility and reflexes have made some improvements. The more we work on them, the more they'll continue to improve. Now, let's move on to your vampire strength. I want you to practice channeling your strength into your strikes. How do I do that, coach? Was it really possible for her to improve her strength besides waiting for her to age or to feed? Focus on tapping into your vampire power. Imagine your punches carrying that extra force, like a surge of energy flowing through you. Feel the strength within you and unleash it when you strike. Sabella takes a moment to concentrate, feeling the power of her vampire heritage coursing through her veins. Normally vampires were simply determined based on their natural potential and wasn't something they trained in. She throws a punch and her fist connects with a training dummy, sending it flying across the training area. Whoa, that was incredible. I can feel the difference when I channel my blood. That's it, Sabella. You're harnessing your potential. When I began looking, your species to figure out how to help you girls adapt at sports better, I couldn't help but become intrigued about the blood magic trait in vampires. It only makes sense if you have the potential for magic that you should be able to harness the energy to improve your own physical abilities. Now, let's work on incorporating some ninja techniques. Since you have the ability to transform into a bat, let's see if we can blend that with some stealthy moves. Sabella transforms into a bat and takes to the air, flying silently above Naruto. Alright, Sabella, try to surprise me. Use your bat form to get behind me undetected. He instructed her. It took quite a bit of time since Sabella never really worked on stealth training. Though utilizing the ability to shape and manipulate her mass, she finally managed to slip past his senses by shrinking and dispersing into mist. In the brief moment he had lost her, Sabella reformed behind the blonde, startling him. Did I surprise you, coach? You definitely did, Sabella. Excellent work. I'll admit I have no idea how the mechanics of how that mist thing works, but I definitely couldn't sense you. Just be sure to stay in control and maintain your focus when utilizing your transformations. I'll keep that in mind, coach. Thanks for the guidance. No problem, Sabella. Training is all about discovering and maximizing your strengths. You have incredible potential as a vampire, and once we equip you with some shinobi arts, the monster hunters will regret coming after you. Sabella smiles, feeling more confident in her abilities as she continues her training with Naruto, determined to become a formidable vampire ninja hybrid. 00000000000000000000000000000000000. While one copy of the blonde was training the vampire, another was with the vivacious red-haired werewolf. Alright Winnie, you ready? With the shinobi techniques I'll teach you incorporated with your werewolf heritages, you're going to grow more than strong enough to protect yourself. Absolutely, coach. Next time I come across those jerk-offs they won't get off so easily. She slammed her hand into her palm. It's good to be motivated, but these skills are to defend yourself and those close to you. Going down the path of revenge can blind you. But now it's time to start off with what you excel in. Now like Sabella's speed and agility are your strengths, so we'll refine those along with your movements, but with the addition of focusing on your strength as well. Come at me then coach. Winnie parted her legs and held out her arms as a grin formed on her face. Ready when you are. Naruto launches a series of rapid punches and kicks towards Winnie, who swiftly maneuvers her body, using her werewolf agility to evade his strikes. Winnie was the most agile and physically all-around built of the girls. Great job Winnie. Your werewolf agility is impressive. Now let's move on to your werewolf strength. Now one of the ways you can improve your strength by working on your speed and senses. Speed can amplify the force and strike of your attacks. As far as your lifting strength, that'll be built upon building some muscle. When it comes down to it, refining your combat abilities opens up a whole new avenue of abilities. So now we're going to measure the limits of each of your abilities. Winnie takes a deep breath, embracing her inner werewolf essence. Making use of both her speed and strength, Winnie followed through the instructions that Naruto gave her so he could get an estimation of her abilities. Finally making use of the airflow exercise that Naruto taught her, as well as making use of her speed, she launches a powerful punch, and her strike lands with a force that sends a training dummy flying. Whoa. I sent that thing flying. Hell yeah. That's it Winnie. You're harnessing your potential. Now, let's work on incorporating some ninja techniques. Since you have heightened senses as a werewolf, let's see if we can combine that with some stealthy moves. Winnie activates her werewolf senses, her hearing and sense of smell heightened as she stalks through the training area. Alright, Winnie, try to surprise me. Use your enhanced senses to your advantage to catch and tag me. Half an hour later, after various attempts, Winnie finally got the drop on Naruto after he eluded her in the forest. Did I manage to surprise you, coach? You definitely did Winnie. Your senses combined with your awareness is a fearsome combination. Just remember to stay focused and in control of your heightened senses. I'll keep that in mind, coach. Thank you for helping me improve. No problem Winnie. Training is all about pushing yourself and finding ways to enhance your natural abilities. Keep yourself dedicated and pushing onward, and you'll gain the strength you desire. Winnie grins, feeling a newfound confidence in her werewolf abilities as she continues training with Naruto, determined to become a powerful werewolf ninja hybrid. 00000000000. Now it was time for the strongest of the ghouls in terms of raw physical strength. The reanimated tissue used by Elsa's family was special, as it had specially enchanted monster flesh incorporated, allowing them to be able to strengthen their muscle mass, instead of having to completely replace limbs. Alright Elsa, the first thing we're going to focus on building your strength and endurance. We'll start with some basic exercises that target different muscle groups and gradually increase the intensity over time. Sounds good. What exercises should I do? Let's begin with weightlifting exercises such as squats, deadlifts, and bench presses. These will help you build overall strength and increase muscle mass. We'll also incorporate cardio exercises like running and jumping to improve your endurance. Elsa follows Naruto's instructions, performing the weightlifting exercises with precision and gradually pushing her limits in each set. Excellent, Elsa. Your strength and form are impressive. Now, let's move on to the next phase, improving your agility and coordination. Those were going to be her weak points. We'll work on agility drills that involve precise footwork, balance, and quick movements. With that he unsealed some equipment. In order to incorporate and specialize in the girls' training, he went into town early in the morning to make sure they would have everything they would need. Let's start with ladder drills and cone exercises to enhance your speed and agility. We'll also incorporate some martial arts techniques to improve your coordination. Elsa follows Naruto's lead, swiftly maneuvering through ladder drills and demonstrating precise kicks and punches. Perfect, Elsa. Your agility is improving and your movements are becoming more fluid. Now, let's combine your physical abilities with some hand-to-hand combat. We'll explore ways to enhance your combat skills and adapt them to your unique strengths. That sounds cool. So, what do I do first? Just watch closely. Taijutsu, as it's called, will be what he primarily focus on you. I'm going to show you the forms and I want you to mimic them. We'll also work on defensive maneuvers and counters to enhance your self-defense capabilities. Elsa practices different strikes and counters, utilizing her strength and agility to execute powerful and precise movements. Amazing, Elsa. It'll take some time, but once you get used to it after some time, you'll be able to do things seamlessly. You're combining your physical abilities with martial arts seamlessly. Keep practicing, and you'll become even more formidable. Thank you, coach. Excitement filled the stitched monster. She was excited and couldn't wait to see how strong she'll become under the blonde's tutelage. Hey, Tenise, are you ready to begin your training? From what I've been able to gather, what I devised so far should be able to help you bring out more of your potential. Okay coach, I'm ready whenever. The vibrant and sweet girl slightly teetered nervously but was still determined to go through it. From what could be observed, she wasn't one for violence, but after what happened, she was determined to go strong. Strong enough so none of the other girls would ever get hurt again protecting her. We'll start with some basic exercises that will help you understand and refine your control over your abilities. She tilted her head curiously. What kind of exercises do you have in mind? Like the one we did at the school. Naruto faintly chuckled and lightly folded his arms. Well, mummies are often associated with ancient curses and bandages. So it was a bit more difficult for me to come up with something in comparison to the others, but it's always a good thing to refine your strengths. Let's begin by working on your bandage manipulation. Try to extend and retract your bandages with precision, as if they were an extension of your limbs. Tenise focuses her energy, extending her bandages with a wave of her hand. She carefully manipulates them, causing them to twist and coil in intricate patterns. Impressive, Tenise. Your bandage control is fantastic. Thank you coach, she stammered slightly from his praise. My mummy daddy spent a lot of time teaching me how to control my wraps. Well, the basics of what I have in mind are going to be pretty easy then. Before we go more into your wrap control, I want to see how well you do in the other branch of your powers. Now, let's explore the more mystical aspect of your mummy powers. Focus on invoking ancient curses and imbuing objects with magical energy. How can I do that? Close your eyes, channel your inner power, and visualize the ancient curses and mystic energy flowing through you. Then, try to imbue an object with this energy. Tenise takes a deep breath, tapping into the mystical aspect of her mummy powers. She concentrates her energy and, with a touch, imbues an ordinary stone with a faint eerie glow. I did it. The stone is radiating with mystical energy. Walking over, he gazed at the stone. There was a glow, but it was still small and weak. Good job, it's going to take some time before you're really able to tap into your essence, but it's a good start. Now I know this might seem a bit rapid, but now we're going to switch over to the physical style arts of the shinobi, taijutsu, or translated into English as hand-to-hand combat. I find it best to see the aptitude you girls have in each branch before taking the training farther. We'll focus on merging your bandage manipulation with your combat skills. Practice using your bandages for offense and defense, creating protective barriers and entangling your opponents. We'll also incorporate some stealth techniques and illusionary tactics to keep your enemies off balance. With that, he created some clones for her to work with. Tenise begins to experiment, using her bandages to create barriers, bind clones, and even create illusions. She swiftly adapts to the integration of her mummy powers with ninja techniques. Fantastic, Tenise. Your adaptability is impressive. Keep practicing, and you'll become even more proficient in combat. He was beginning to relish in his students' progress. The sort of pride that only those who enjoy passing on their knowledge and teaching could feel. It's all thanks to you, coach. She had never really gave it that much thought to train and use her abilities. But feeling the energy coursing through her. The rush and excitement was unlike anything she had ever felt, and she wanted more. The training sessions continued over the following weeks, each session tailored to Tenise's mummy powers and abilities. Naruto watched as she grew more confident in her control and her understanding of the ancient curses and bandage manipulation. Alright, Tenise, now that we've refined your mummy powers, let's dive deeper into your combat abilities. As a mummy, you possess incredible physical resilience. Let's work on enhancing your physical strength and endurance. Once we get you up to snuff, we can have you start sparring with Fantasma. And then when you two are stronger, we can have you spar with Sabella and Winnie. In terms of physical ability, Elsa was still far too high of a plateau for any of the girls until they broke through their current limits. But how, coach? Unlike Elsa, I can't replace or modify my body like horsemen can. He nodded in understanding. The strange biology of Elsa's people was something he was still trying to understand himself. He has been spending time and researching if it would be possible, but Elsa, like Fantasma, might also be on the list of his students who might not have the capability to learn senjutsu. At this rate, it looks like only Winnie would be capable, and he didn't want to do anything that might hurt the others' feelings or make him think favoritism was affid. Let's start with some strength training. We'll focus on bodyweight exercises and gradually incorporate weighted exercises to build your strength. Additionally, we'll include cardio workouts to boost your endurance. Even mummified your body was still once normally human, so with the use of your mystic energy, it can still be improved. Only unlike most other monster species, it'll take a lot more effort to get benefits out of your training than even a human until you get better on learning to control your mystic energy to boost your body. Until then we can still put in the groundwork to improve it. We'll begin with basic calisthenics like push-ups, squats, and planks. As you progress, we'll introduce weights to challenge your strength further. For cardio, we'll engage in activities like running, climbing, and jumping to improve your endurance. Tenise eagerly embraced the strength and endurance training. She worked tirelessly, pushing her limits with each exercise. Her mummy physiology proved advantageous in building remarkable strength. Day by day he had charted her progress like the others, and sure enough she was growing. While not as rapidly as the others girls, in comparison to where she once was, she had grown by leaps and bounds. Now, let's shift our focus to your unique mummy powers. We'll delve into your ability to reanimate objects and control the ancient curses. How can I improve my control over these abilities? I never really practiced with those much. Don't worry Tan, we'll start off small. Let's practice reanimating and controlling inanimate objects, like small statues or figurines. Visualize your connection with the ancient curses and project that energy onto the objects. Try to make them move, obey your commands, or even levitate. He explained as he set down some small army soldiers and figures from a recent trip into town they had made. The blonde had made sure that one day a week would be a rest day for the girls to rest and recover so they wouldn't physically overtax themselves. During that time he had taken to watching and reading anime manga which Winnie had gotten him into. Right now he was currently watching a lot of great and popular series. Bleach, One Piece, Demon Slayer, Jujutsu Kaisen, Attack on Titans, Vagabond, Monster, Berserk, Vinland Sage, and Dragon Ball Z. So many of these series really reminded him of his past life. He really related to a lot of the main characters and could easily see himself being friends with most of them. In fact, it was actually DBZ that gave him a lot of ideas for some of the training regiments. Analyzing it closely, he realized why his senseis were so great and how they were able to teach him. They had a fundamental understanding of the body's limits, the understanding of rest and meditation along with patience. Even if he trained his ass off and had to find for the strengths he gained, even he would admit he was born with a few blessings and advantages that others wouldn't be able to overcome, no matter how much they trained, unless they had genetic modification, a bloodline, or stolen a broken power. Turning to Tenise and watch her pour her heart into her training, he knew that the right training under his watchful eye, plus the shinobi techniques non-native to this world and their gifts, would make them a fearsome force that would even surpass their mythical parents and could even carve out legends of their own in the world. Tenise concentrated, channeling her mummy powers to interact with an array of small figurines. She watched in awe as they began to move, responding to her commands with a subtle eerie grace. It's working. I did it coach, I did it. She beamed with childlike exuberance. He smiled softly in satisfaction. Great job, Tenise. Your control is impressive. Now, let's introduce combat scenarios that involve reanimating and manipulating objects during battle. We'll work on utilizing them for offense, defense, and strategic advantage. That sounds challenging. How should I start? We'll set up a training area with obstacles and target dummies. Your goal is to reanimate objects and use them in combat scenarios. This will allow you to practice offensive maneuvers and create defensive barriers on the fly. Naruto and Tenise began the training, with Tenise using her mummy powers to bring objects to life during sparring sessions. She reanimated tree branches to act as allies, used rocks to form barriers, and even animated ropes to entangle and trip her opponents. As they continued on, they began working on her precision. Starting with smaller objects like coins, keys, or even tiny figurines. The goal was to control their movements and actions with absolute precision. Tenise spent hours each day refining her control over the tiniest objects. She levitated coins in intricate patterns, made keys dance in midair, and created miniature figurine battles with astonishing precision. That's the spirit, Tenise. All of you are proving quite talented, now it's time to move on to the next phase. Now, let's merge your physical strength and combat skills with your newfound precision and control over your mummy powers. This time you're going to work on simultaneous object manipulation while in combat. In other words, reanimating nearby objects to aid you in battle. Your average fighter, monster, or mage will be focusing on physical or magical attacks or weapons coming from you directly. Only those who are highly trained adepts or higher levels will be seasoned enough to keep an eye out for summoned or telekinetic objects, and even then, can still give you an edge and allow you to control the battle, depending on how effective you are in it. And with that the latest rounds of spars began. Tenise faced off against Naruto in training sessions, utilizing her reanimated objects strategically. She'd create distractions, form impromptu weapons, or even bind her opponent's movements. And with that they continued down the line. Stealth that made use of her power to camouflage. While it was still far too early for her to dispense into sand like Sabella was learning to do with mist, it would give her the foundation to begin working with that power later on. Even so, the final of the branch of sessions of her power were beginning to look fruitful as she began putting all she learned together in tandem with the camouflage. As the training continued, Tenise's abilities as a mummy warrior expanded even further. Her endurance allowed her to engage in prolonged battles without fatigue, her adaptability made her versatile in any environment, and her self-regeneration ensured she remained resilient in the face of adversity. Soon came the end of another day. You've come a long way, Tenise. Keep pushing your limits and refining your abilities. Keep that drive and mindset and there'll be nothing you can't do. I will coach. With your support and training, I'm ready to face any challenge that comes my way. She beamed proudly. While still a bit soft-spoken and tonight, the last few weeks had really worked wonders and helped Tenise come out of herself a bit and boost her confidence. They continued down the list of avenues as one by one the mummy girl developed as warrior. From practicing creating illusions and distractions. A mummy warrior who can control perception is a formidable opponent. Tenise and their part of the squad would be a strategic asset. Misdirection to confuse the enemies with surprise attacks and tactics that could turn the tide of battle. And when the time come he would begin working with her on the element of fire. Just as Elsa would be to lightning. Winnie to wind, Fantasma to lightning, and Sabella to water, she too had an element she was suited to. While it will still be some time yet, he couldn't wait to see how strong his students would become. 0000000000000. Naruto stood in the heart of the training ground, his gaze fixed on Fantasma, the ghostly girl with a spectral aura that surrounded her. She had approached him, seeking guidance in harnessing her unique ghostly abilities, and Naruto was more than willing to help. Hey Kochi, thank you for agreeing to help me. I've always felt my ghostly powers but never truly understood how to control them. You're welcome, Fantasma. Let's start by exploring your ghost powers and understanding their nature. Fantasma nodded, her ethereal form shifting slightly as she focused her attention. Wisps of ghostly energy danced around her. First, let's work on your spectral projection since you got incorporeal being down packed. Try forming a simple ghostly image, like a floating orb. The ability to create ghostly forms and illusions was going to be quite powerful. Fantasma extended her hand, and a translucent glowing orb materialized before her. It shimmered with a faint eerie light. The blonde began to wonder just how much talent these girls were born with. Alright, now enhance it even further. Try to create a more complex image, like a spectral animal. Fantasma concentrated, and before Naruto's eyes, a spectral wolf emerged beside her, its form shifting and flickering like a ghostly apparition. Excellent, Fantasma. Your control over spectral projection is impressive. Now I want to see your manipulation. Fantasma nodded and began to focus on a nearby stone. Concentrating, she began to levitate, hovering in midair as if defying gravity. After spending a few hours working up larger and large objects, they went on their way to the next aspect of ghostly power. Ghostly possession. But that Fantasma drifted towards one of the training dummies that had been set up, and as she phased into it, the dummy's limbs moved as if animated by a ghostly force. But that done, they moved further away from the residence to one of the areas Naruto set up. It was an obstacle course with set traps, dummies, and crafted domiciles that acted as buildings. Alright, with those down, now let's run through the obstacle course. Imagine you're on a mission, and you need to use your ghostly powers to infiltrate an enemy's fortress. You'll need to become incorporeal to pass through walls, use spectral projection for reconnaissance, ethereal manipulation to disarm traps, ghostly possession to gather information, and ghostly flight to navigate the fortress. Fantasma closed her eyes, visualizing the mission scenario. She began to flow through the steps, switching between her ghostly abilities seamlessly, each skill complementing the other. As some time passed and he was satisfied with her progress, they began working on the next stage. Now let's work with your spectral energy. Try to project your ghostly energy onto your fists and strike the training dummy. Focus on the impact of your blows. Over the last few days while training, Fantasma was getting a feel for her spectral energy during the training, and now she could put it to practical use. Fantasma extended her hand, and as she struck the training dummy, a burst of spectral energy erupted upon contact, sending it flying. With that, now it was time to kick it up a notch. With multiple clones formed around her, she began combating and popping clones one by one. With that, she took the energy manipulation to the next level. She concentrated a beam of ghostly energy hurtling toward a target. It struck with precision, creating a burst of spectral light. Well done, Fantasma, your offense is looking good. Now to work on the defense. Barriers are good for both defense and containment, so try and make a barrier around yourself. Fantasma formed a transparent glowing barrier around her, shimmering with ghostly energy. It fizzled after a few seconds. So with a day or so of practice she was finally able to get sufficient mastery over the barrier to maintain and even take physical strikes. It would still take time before she would be able to use it on others though. Making excellent progress. Now to work on your illusions more. Let's see how far you've come. Fantasma projected an illusion of herself, creating a second ghostly figure that moved independently. After testing how well they moved and reacted independently with a quick spar, the blonde was satisfied. As the training session concluded, Naruto could see the determination in Fantasma's eyes. She had unlocked a new level of understanding and control over her ghostly abilities, and with each passing day, she would grow stronger. Weeks passed, and Naruto's training with Fantasma continued to progress. Their sessions evolved from honing her basic ghost powers to refining her combat tactics and strategic thinking. Fantasma's ethereal abilities grew with each passing day, and she had become a formidable force. Just like with each of the girls, it was time to start working on some more unique abilities. Let's work on expanding your arsenal of spectral abilities. First, try to manipulate your spectral energy into a concentrated projectile attack, similar to a shuriken. Fantasma focused her energy, and with a swift motion, she projected a spectral shuriken that sliced through the air and struck a distant target with precision. All the practice on manipulation from illusions to telekinesis really helped out. The time spent working on her camouflage as well really translated well to her grasp on using shape manipulation. Being a specter and dead, Fantasma didn't seem to have an affinity for the 5 main elements. Even with all the training at best, there was a minimal spark with lightning due to her poltergeist-like nature. So, as he spent the last few days ranking his brain, he finally came up with an idea. Letting out her signature giggle, the girl wrecked the last of the clones that had been created to spar with her. Alright, now for the hardest part of your training yet, my spectral student. We're going to start into the foray of you learning yin chakra nature. Each of these girls were going to be a nature to reckon with. Once they come together as a team, he couldn't imagine too many out there that would be a threat to them. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the story. If you did, please like the video. Also consider subscribing and sharing this with your friends. This will really mean a lot for me. I'll see you in the next one.